Well, Ash, happy Halloween.
Oh, it's so spooky. Everyone here is scary today. I'm wearing a skull dress. You're...
Orange.
Yeah, that's pretty terrifying.
It really is. Listen, it's part of the season, right? I just see it everywhere that I go. Definitely isn't like the seasons are always like a month behind these days because
No.
of the way. I don't know if it's just a UK thing or if it's a global warming thing.
It's a point of great frustration for me at the moment, though, Connor, because we're already getting so much Christmas stuff everywhere.
We are.
And I'm like, no, it's Halloween's time. The spooky time is here. What are you doing?
Exactly. It's very upsetting.
Deeply upsetting. So we're here to restore the balance, Connor.
Damn right. We have kicked off the spooky month with Geist, an incredibly scary game that was so terrifying that it's made people that we know run paralyzed in fear. Don't ask how they run while paralyzed. But we decided to cap it off with another terrifying game.
I mean, yeah, how long has it been since I forced you to play one of my PS2 horror games? Like 2 games ago?
Yeah.
That's far too long, Connor. We're going back to the PlayStation 2, back to Capcom, with 2005's The Best Year of Our Lives, Haunting Ground.
Haunting Ground. Can we address the elephant of the room before we go any further on this?
Oh, and what's that, my friend?
This is not a good name for this game.
Yeah, so you may be thinking to yourself, Haunting Ground, that's a good name for a spook 'em up, right? There's going to be ghosts and spirits and all kinds of horrible ghouls.
Oh yeah, you lurk around like a mausoleum and there's these
yes.
horrible spirits.
Maybe a
skulls
Ouija board or whatever legally distinct name you have to use for that now, like a spirit board or something like that.
Yeah, this game doesn't have ghosts in it.
This game is exclusively about the horror of science.
Yeah, it has a dog in it.
It has a wonderful dog in it.
Yeah, this is a huge juxtaposition from Geist, which had ghosts and terrible dogs. This game has no ghosts, great dog.
Fantastic dog. And actually, this is a fun piece of, supplemental lore for our loyal listeners. People who have listened to the entire back catalogue, and by the entire back catalogue, I mean the first 2 episodes, may remember that we've spoken about Haunting Ground both times of those episodes.
Yeah, both during Resident Evil 4 as well as during Clock Tower 3. Primarily because, one, Haunting Ground was based on one of the previous builds of Resident Evil 4, but also that it takes a lot of inspiration from the Clock Tower series, and in many ways Haunting Ground feels like it is the continuation to Clock Tower that it never properly got, right? This feels like it's a better incarnation of all of those ideas than Clock Tower 3 ever was.
I've always been very curious to look through the credits of Haunting Ground and look through the credits of Clock Tower 3 and try and see how many of those developers actually do come over from Clock Tower onto Haunting Ground. Because it must be at least some of the lead developers, because some of the ideas are so similar that you have to expect that there's someone there who's trying to make that game work again.
Exactly.
But I'm too lazy to do that, so...
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's only speculation, and for all we know, we could add an addendum to this. Maybe I could put in like the top comment or something.
Yeah,
I like to put a little something about each game. As a very brief tangent as well, I also want to say to everyone that continues to listen to the show, thank you very much for supporting us, because we have a lot of fun doing this, and we have been looking forward to talking about basically everything on the list for a long time.
But I've been very excited about talking about Haunting Ground, as you might come to expect from my legacy as being obsessed with these kind of games. But...
Yeah, this is very much an Ash game. This was her decision very early on.
Yeah. So let's set the scene, shall we? So this is actually a good way for us to talk about the growth of the list and how it became what it is today. Because when we were first doing it, it was kind of like what's the word? We were so chuffed about being able to see each other after the coronavirus lockdown that we started doing this game thing as like oh, Connor, let's have a reason to hang out and let's play some video games together. That's a good enough excuse to spend time together.
Yeah, like we wanted to just have something to do in order to kind of justify us going to each other's houses and to just do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I believe at this point we had played Clock Tower 3, Shadow the Hedgehog, Geist, Legend of K?
And Legend of K, a game that we keep pushing back for one reason or another.
That was supposed to be the upcoming episode, but we've decided to delay it in terms of so we can have a spooky game instead.
Exactly.
But yeah, so at the time, the kind of motivator for Haunting Ground, because Haunting Ground was a slight deviance from the usual pattern, although I feel like it's a slight deviance for me in the same way that saying that Legend of K is a bad game wouldn't make sense to you.
No, well, it wouldn't make sense to me, because I think it's perfectly fine. But...
Yeah, whereas I think Haunting Ground is perfectly fine, but you might see it as a bad game in some ways.
Oh, yeah, it has problems.
Yeah, so this is a game that we didn't play because we thought it would be bad, which was the original qualifier for the list, basically. The reason we were playing it is because I was intending to write a review of it, in much the same way that I have been for games on my blog for the last few years now.
Yeah.
So I was like, listen, Connor, I want to write a review of Haunting Ground, Clock Tower 3, and Rule of Rose, which are 3 games that I think are linked in some fun ways.
Yes, I really like your trifecta of them.
Yes, and the 3 things is Stalker game, Dog game, Capcom game.
Yeah.
So Haunting Ground and Clock Tower 3 are Capcom games. Clock Tower 3 and Haunting Ground are Stalker games, and Rule of Rose and Haunting Ground are Dog games.
Yes.
So that's the way they're all linked in this odd way. It was 2020, we had just finished Legend of K, and I was like, Connor, I would love to write a review of Haunting Ground, but I don't want to play through Haunting Ground again of my own volition. So will you come with me, lend me your aid, allow me to get through Haunting Ground again so that I can then write a review of it, basically?
To which I offered.
Yes,
I was like,
you very graciously acquiesced, and then we proceeded to have the first game where I didn't let you play any of it.
Oh, that's true. I didn't. That's the thing, because I've actually played Haunting Ground for the first time today.
Yes, when we were doing our replay for purposes of refreshing our memories, this is the first time Connor actually touched the game.
Yeah, other than that, I was completely a spectator on this one, which I think even with Clock Tower 3, I played a little bit of it, but for the most part, I was just kind of there to give like a little bit of commentary, because I just enjoyed watching it more than having to kind of fumble with the controls a bit of it.
Yeah, that might have actually raised your estimations of the game rather than actually having to play it.
Yeah, it really did.
Yeah.
Although that being said, when I did revisit it for the podcast, I surprisingly enjoyed it, but it was still...
It's very stiff, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, so what I want to talk about now that we've gotten why we were playing it is I want to talk about what Haunting Ground is, how it kind of rests within the industry as a large, and why that position makes me very sad.
Yeah.
Because, alright, friends, beloved listeners, as you well know by this point, I am in love with old PS2 style survival horror games. You know, the fixed camera angles, the archaic puzzles, all that stuff. I love that shit.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite kind of game. I can't get enough of it. By my records, by my memory, Haunting Ground is the second to last one of those games ever produced by a big company before they completely died out.
What's the last one, out of curiosity?
Rule of Rose.
Straight up, Rule of Rose.
Rule of Rose in 2006. And then after that, nothing. Obviously, you get your indie revivals and your re-releases. And the RE remakes, or the Resident Evil remakes, I should say to be clear, are kind of going for that style. But in terms of the fixed camera angle, very classic adventure game thing they had going on there, that was kind of it.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate nail in the coffin that prevents the ghost and spectre of such a thing to rise up once again.
And then, so this is the last Capcom survival horror game produced until the release of Resident Evil 7, I would imagine, in 2017.
Oh, true, because this was the same year as Resident Evil 4, which there's a incredibly strong case to be made that Resident Evil 4 isn't even horror. It has its moments, but it's mainly an action game,
It's an action
wager.
game. Yeah. This is a pure horror, capital H game.
Yeah. Resident Evil 5 and 6 are really
do not count,
horror.
not even close.
Resident Evil 6 is scary to people who have a irrational fear of being hit by an ambulance out of nowhere.
Though, having said that, please feel free to come into the comments and tell me all the games of this type that I've just forgotten about, because go ahead, own me online.
Oh, yeah, no, like, please. For all we know, that might be something we want to cover in the future if it's something that gleams our fancy.
Well, because now that we put these episodes out for people to enjoy on the internet, you actually can now recommend games for us, and we might take your suggestions if you have something really interesting to look at. So
yeah, please do make any recommendations if you're interested in us talking about something. We can't guarantee we'd look at everything, but we would at very least be curious to know what you are interested in and what you would like us to share and talk about. So do we want to get into the nitty-gritty of Haunting Ground now?
Excellent. So I will provide you with a basic introduction to Haunting Ground's premise, basically.
By all means.
So you are Fiona Belli. Fiona is currently in Italy visiting her parents. However, during a car ride through the countryside, the car suddenly crashes, and Fiona is plunged into unconsciousness. When she awakens, she has been spirited away to this mysterious castle in the forest, known as Belli Castle, which suspiciously is her last name. She is Fiona Belli.
Yeah, that's an interesting coincidence. That hadn't even cottoned on to me.
Yeah. So she's trapped in this cage, being watched over by this strange, hulking beast of a man who is cutting at some decrepit, decaying flesh with a massive cleaver. She finds her way into escaping because the man holding her is not particularly intelligent. and is now forced to roam around this castle, figuring out what happened to her parents and why she's being kept in this mysterious world.
It's interesting that you call them a man, because I believe the shots in that particular instance kind of portray them to be more of a beast. Although, I suppose at the same time, one could say, it's that like Frankenstein's monster thing of like, are they a monster or are they a man? What would you refer to them as first,
Well, especially considering when you realize what Debilitas, who is the character who has kept you prisoner, is. Like, he's not technically a human, quote-unquote.
What? Please give me a refresher of what happens after that, because I believe you just kind of wander around for a bit.
Yeah, so the opening sections in the game find you wandering around the courtyard of the castle, and this is the first indication of what this game is very much aiming for. So Fiona Belly is a very well-endowed woman. She has got an itty-bitty waist and just... you get what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, it's a video game that was made in the 2000s. Yeah. Characters very much.
And literally, the first time in which you have control of Fiona, all she is wearing is this very thin silk sheet around her.
Yeah.
So that's how the game opens. You're kind of wandering around this courtyard, and you find your way into a guest room, essentially. It's here where you find a set of clothes that has been laid out for you. So it's a really weird opening because... it kind of oscillates between you're being threatened by these horrible people who mean ill of you, but they're also trying to treat you kind of as a guest in the castle.
Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic because in several circumstances, the residents in this castle have an ulterior motive for you being there.
Yeah.
They each have something that they want of you, whether that be benign or utterly monstrous. But at the same time, they treat you with a certain sense of decorum.
Cordiality.
Cordial, that's the best way to put it. Based on their specific needs and wants.
Honestly, if you didn't know that this game was a straight-up horror game, or let's say that you are Fiona Belly and you're experiencing these events firsthand, you could interpret the opening of the game to mean that the actual owners of the castle and their servants aren't hostile to you. It's just Debilitas, who is the manservant that is chasing you.
Yeah. I think this is actually a fairly common trope in a lot of classical horror stories, and by classical I mean that kind of 1800s, 1900s style of writing them. Because more than often than not, a story about a stranger entering into a haunted castle or a spooky residence somewhere that has, resident evils.
Yes.
Not to be, as it were.
Less biohazards, more resident evils.
Yeah, more resident evils. It tends to be that the groundskeepers and staff in that kind of place, they tend to be trying to welcome you in. They have a clear, insidious kind of like aim.
Yeah, they're very unsettling.
And a lot of the other characters that are in the game tends to treat themselves with a sort of veneer of mystery. I think one of them doesn't show his face to you until the halfway point of the game.
Yeah.
And while another one, who is the presumed owner of the castle, I don't think you see anything of him at all.
No, he's actually, in the early parts of the game, your benefactor. He's providing you notes with hints on how to solve puzzles and trying to, guide your way through the castle. So you never see him, but you come to think of him as someone on your side.
Yeah, exactly. Like a mystery helper, as it were. Yeah. Which is great for that kind of story, because it's a case of it's not that the whole world is against Fiona in this case. Yeah. There's someone who's trying to help her. Unfortunately... everyone who on the outset is not trying to help Fiona out of their kindness of their heart.
They all have their own horrible ends they're trying to reach.
Yeah.
Because that's what's really engaging about the first opening moments of the story, is that Fiona knows nothing and you know nothing.
Yeah.
You don't know who Fiona is, why she's been taken here, what's going on. Any of these things don't make any sense to you, and you're just slowly unraveling it as you explore the castle.
Yeah.
You truly do learn everything at the same rate that Fiona does, which is really exciting.
Yeah, it's a good start and a good sign that at the very outset of oh, right, this is a game that is being made by Capcom, a very large, prestigious company in the games industry at this point, who is well known for doing a heck of a lot of good work.
Yeah.
So it's a thing of, this is a good sign. Let's see where this game goes.
Yeah, the game is also very good at making you unsettled very quickly. So, what I always think about is that when you find these clothes, you put them on, and they're these very revealing chest bodice with a very low cut neckline and this very short skirt and a choker, and it's this really ridiculous outfit.
Yeah.
But the cutscene where Fiona puts it on, it's implied quite heavily that someone is watching her through the eyes of a painting in her room.
Oh, yes, I remember this now. Yes.
It's very predatory. A lot of the threats in this game are about violating Fiona in a way that's quite unsettling.
Yeah.
Like whether it be her privacy or her body or anything like that.
Yeah. I think it's fair to sort of say as well, just to kind of let people know about this kind of game if this does pique your interest. I like your way of putting it, which is that this does not seem like the kind of game that could be made today.
Oh, no, I don't think any large company could get away with making a game that's so... In case anyone wants to know this before we talk about it, this game is quite heavily about sexual assault.
Yeah.
Like, all of the villains want Fiona for her womanhood, basically. They all have different reasons for wanting to do terrible things to her. In a way that I don't think you could make this game and get away with it today. I think it would be too controversial.
Yeah, especially in this particular fashion. Like, maybe other people could tackle the subject in a different light, but they would probably do it in a significantly more different way.
This is very what's the word? Not maybe exploitative, but it's very crass in terms of dealing with its themes. Like, it's not schlock, but it's very loud and exploitative and kind of unsettling in a way where it's just so brash and weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Why can't I think of the example of what that is? God.
It's a very good start to the opening of the game. But do we want to talk about the general gameplay, as it were? Because
so I think we've talked about kind of like where the story opens up, and this is once you've gotten Fiona's clothes, you can then begin exploring the castle at your leisure.
Yeah, and what an open castle it is. It is big.
Yeah, so this is a very late-gen PS2 game being made by one of the masters of the hardware at the time, Capcom. And it really shows, because this game is surprisingly impressive in terms of its budget and scope.
Yeah.
The castle is a very wide, open environment. There are no load times between rooms.
No, there isn't.
The entire level is open to you.
That's really, really impressive with the PlayStation 2, that it's almost seamless just how much of the castle you can go through without hitting any kind of hiccup or any kind of pause. You know, we're used nowadays to the rhetoric about, SSDs and short load times, the whole jargon about the PlayStation 5's loading time thing that it has, but it's the fact that so much of this stuff can be done on the PlayStation 2.
And that kind of leads me into my big thesis about this game's systems and its mechanics, which is that it feels like it's a game which is trying to be incredibly naturalistic. Like, I feel like it's trying to be as dynamic and not video gamey as possible.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
There's a very minimal HUD as well. Like,
so there's no health bar. Fiona does have stamina, which if she loses it all, she will die, but you can't... The only way to know how low it is to watch Fiona's status. So if she's like... It's kind of like the old Resident Evil games, right? Where it's like, there's no health bar, but if you're like leaning over, that means you're in low health.
There's effects on the screen as well during certain damage states too.
You have your stamina, and you also have Fiona's panic, which is very similar to the same system that's in Clock Tower 3, which is when Fiona is being attacked, or when anything happens that kind of unsettles her, she will begin to fly more and more into a panic. And when you hit the kind of critical panic state, the screen will go all blurry and fuzzy, and you can't see very well. And Fiona will begin moving forward of her own volition.
Yeah.
You can kind of angle her by moving the left stick right and left, basically. But she will just keep going forward. And if she hits into something, she will bounce off of it.
Yeah, she will. Pretty decent animations across the board as well. I think because we briefly had a look at the like model viewer things in the extra section as well, and some of the animations definitely do show their age, but I think for the most part it's relatively fluid.
Yeah, and I think Fiona's animations are all pretty good, and she has this like scream when she goes into panic, which really sells the fact that she's beginning to lose her cool.
Yeah, it is the kind where I think after some repeated takes of us having game overs and having to reload, it was getting a little bit kind of grating, but that will happen with any kind of loud pitched kind of
I think I was just always comparing it in my head to the Clock Tower one, where Alyssa just starts doing the little duck run where she's flailing her arms around and she looks very silly.
Oh yeah, that's the thing, is the panic system is very similar to Clock Towers, although I think the key difference is that there's a lot of times in Clock Towers where Alyssa will panic and she will just stop. It will just wrest control completely away from you, and it will be really frustrating. But at the very least with Fiona, you have a certain level of control.
You do. You can move her, and also you have a much wider array of items available to reduce panic and to mitigate it, basically.
Yeah.
It also helps as well that, as we were saying, the levels are much wider and much more elaborately designed than the ones in Clock Tower.
Oh yeah, it's way easier to kite enemies.
Exactly, yeah. Like, there's more space. It's not like you're being funneled down one corridor, so it's not quite as game-ending to go into panic as it is in Clock Tower 3.
No, not at all. Although they both use lavender as a calming method, which I know it's like a natural herbal remedy, but it was interesting to see that in both cases and be like, you guys really do have the same.
Like, it's really funny as well because the lavender calming effect in Haunting Ground is a slow effect. It takes time to fully activate.
Yeah.
So it's just the idea that Fiona is being chased by these horrible stalkers, and she pulls out a little bit of lavender, and she's like, I feel so much better now.
Just a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's not even lavender water.
No.
This is where it's implied to have a kind of almost holy water effect on the subordinates. This is just like...
So the next part of my kind of naturalistic view of this game's systems and mechanics is that unlike Alyssa, you have a lot more actions available to you. So Fiona can kick.
Yep.
She can duck, and she can... If you run and make her charge into things, she will like do a little shoulder tackle.
Oh, this I never saw.
Yeah. You can also do a backstep.
Okay.
So a lot of the game's puzzles and interactions and enemy encounters use those systems in a really fun way. So for instance, if you open a door, it creates a shadow in which you can hide. Yeah. So you can open a door, go behind it, crouch, and that will count as a hiding state. You don't necessarily have to find a place to hide.
Yes, this is a very important comparison point, is the difference between hiding states in Clock Tower 3 and in this game, which is that in this game they are significantly more reasonable and realistic.
Yeah.
Because like they still work for the most part. But Clock Tower 3, it almost felt like magic. There were some hiding spots which made you completely impervious to any kind of damage, any kind of real threat. You'd get caught in a couple, but there were some that were just golden zones. Never a problem at all. The games would just turn into, cool, I'm just going to go to the one spot until Chopper magics himself away in pixie dust.
Whereas in Haunting Ground, you can go into a room, see that there's like a bookshelf on one side of the area, go, I can just walk behind there and crouch and I'm hiding. And I haven't got to have the game tell me I'm hiding. I just know I'm hiding.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's much more organic.
Yeah, significantly so. The door opening thing's a really great example. Furniture, as you say, with the bookshelves and things.
Like, with bookshelves as well, if you get an enemy on one side and go around it and then charge into it, you'll knock the bookshelf over onto them.
Yeah.
Like, it's really, like, reactive in a way that I wasn't expecting on a replay. I was surprised how much effort they put into making the environments feel alive, basically.
Oh, definitely. One thing that comes to mind as well is how, in some cases, it's a thing of you go down a corridor, you explore it, you open a door, and it's a complete dead end.
Yeah,
it's not even a closet. You're just like, oh, great, there's nothing in here. But then, oh, wait a minute. If you just go into there, shut the door behind you, it's a hiding spot.
Yeah.
They're not going to see you unless they know to check. And we fooled them a couple times with that.
We did, yeah. It's truly the Breath of the Wild of stalker chase games, you know?
It really is.
If you think you can do it, you probably can. It's also as well that you have a lot more options about combating enemies. So the number of items that you can acquire in this game is, I would say, almost to the extreme. By the end of one of my playthroughs, I had about 4 pages of 20 items each, all with their own effects and their own downsides and upsides. So some of the stuff that you can get, for instance, is like the stamina restoring items or the panic reducing items.
Yeah.
But you can also get like landmines.
Yeah.
Like little powders of crystal that you put on the ground, and if an enemy walks over them, they will explode, dealing damage. Because you can deal damage to the stalkers in this game, and you can eventually incapacitate them.
Yeah, I think that something like Mr. X is probably a better comparison. Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 is a better comparison than, say, the Clock Tower.
Than Kuroda.
Yeah. Because they're a lot more organic, whereas in, Clock Tower, it would be a case where the subordinates will be something that, there's some doofy moments where you can push over Sledgehammer and he's down. Yeah,
but that's always very much, there's a glowing point on the ground that you interact with and then you can do it once.
Yeah, exactly. This is significantly more dynamic. It's a much more fleshed out way of doing this kind of game.
Yeah. The levels are quite large, as we say, and what you're trying to do in classic survival horror fashion is going around, finding items that help you solve puzzles, avoiding death traps, and all kinds of things like this.
Yeah.
What's stopping you is that you are being chased through these levels by a stalker.
But there are a few other sort of minor sort of opponents in the way. One that's very similar to Clock Tower 3 are the Luminescents, I think they're called.
They're called Luminescents, yes. Yeah. They are little specks of life energy.
Yeah, they're exactly like the weird moth butterfly things in Clock Tower 3. They're a small flying creature that doesn't hurt you, but it raises your panic as the main sort of like detriment to it, because you don't have a big threshold before the panic becomes a problem.
Exactly. If you get hit maybe like 2 or 3 times by an enemy, that's enough to get you into the full panic.
Exactly, yeah.
And what's cool about it though, is this is actually a great excuse to talk about another part of the game's reactive quote-unquote gameplay that I really like, is that there's a lot of emphasis on doors and their position.
Yeah.
So the way that you prevent luminescence from being able to track you is that you would go into a room, see a luminescent is in there, go through another room, and then close the door behind you because you can't have luminescence going through the doors. They get stopped by that, basically.
Yeah.
Why I'm bringing this up is that, like, there's so much weird tech with the doors. Like, they are kind of loading gates in that when you go between them, the game loads for like 2 seconds or so. So there's a lot of weird stuff you can do with them. For instance, you can kick them open.
Yeah.
Like, you haven't got to open them with the button to open them. You can just kick them and they react as, like, basically items with boundaries and with physics, basically.
Oh, yeah, that's very helpful given that the door opening animation is very long. Of Fiona just, like, steadily putting herself in the right position, daintily reaching out to the door handle and then, like, lightly pushing it open.
She does open it faster when she's in panic or, like, when she's being chased. Like, she'll do, like, kind of like a more hurried, like, oh, get this door open.
Yeah.
But what's really fun about it, Connor, is that if you kick a door into an enemy, it damages them.
Really?
Yeah, so you can stand behind a door and, like, let's say Debilitas will open it and you just kick it back in his face and you can just keep doing that forever.
This is Fiona's Smash Brothers side B if she
exactly,
had it.
kick door.
Well, that's what's heartbreaking about her appearance in, what's it called, Tatsunoko vs. Capcom?
She is indeed in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom in an ending.
Yeah, she's in an ending. She's not a fighter in
It's like a 2D illustration of her and Debilitas and Hewie, and that's it.
It's the most legacy that Haunting Ground gets, except for one.
A Street Fighter V costume.
That was not what I was thinking.
There is a Fiona Street Fighter V costume. For Cammy.
For Cammy, oh my god.
Yeah.
That's the character for it, right? British blonde lady.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah, that checks out.
But if you ever wanted to see Fiona with the thickest thighs you've ever seen in your life, that's the time for you.
I mean, she's already, as we say, very well endowed in Haunting Ground. They make a very strong point to emphasize that in the game. But...
Well, she's not dummy thick, though.
No, she's not got, like, that athletic kind of, like... Despite all the door kicking she does. I think there's also another important character that we've yet to touch upon.
A precious little guy who we've yet to comment upon?
A wonderful little son of a bitch that where the fuck has he gone, Ash?
Where the fuck is Hewie?
Where the fuck is Hewie? We haven't talked about him all podcast. I need him for the puzzles. No one knows what Hewie is yet. You gotta tell me, Ash. Where the fuck is he?
Calm yourself, man. I will tell you about Hewie.
I'm sorry, I ran into a luminescent and it made me panic.
Listen, viewers, I like to think that you and I have a bond of trust. Take my word for this. Connor is currently running into a wall over and over. He's just bouncing into a wall and flipping off of it.
I have a concussion.
So yes, there is a huge asset or facet of this game that we have yet to touch upon, and that is the presence of a very good boy named Hewie.
Love Hewie.
He's a precious little guy. Hewie is a German white shepherd, or a white German shepherd, that's the right order of those words, who you find trapped in the castle, and once you free him, he is a companion. He is with you the entire game.
Yeah.
What this means, basically, is that there are a whole bunch of puzzles in which you have to utilize Hewie. And how you utilize
Hewie. That's the term now.
You got to utilize Hewie. You can basically give Hewie simple commands. What those commands are is you can make him search, you can make him wait, you can make him attack, and you can make him sit.
Yeah.
And using those 4 commands, you can kind of solve puzzles, fight enemies, because Hewie can attack enemies for you. In fact, he's kind of a crucial part of the game's escaping from stalkers, because
100%.
Especially the second stalker, whose name is Daniella, she is very, very quick. She will just chase you down to the ends of the earth.
Yeah.
And what you can do is you can get Hewie to basically grab her and keep her in place for a few seconds while you give a chance to get away, basically. So he's very, very useful on that front. What's fun about him, though, is that he has a relationship meter.
Yeah.
So what the game calls it, and this makes me laugh to no end because it tells you what it is at the end of the game, it's called the dog level.
The dog level?
Yeah, like, it's your dog level. It's your Hewie friendship meter. It's called the dog level.
To all listeners who have dogs, please let us know what your dog level is so that we can...
we can judge you on that.
Yeah, we can gather that data, give you a ranking system at the end of your life.
There you go, yeah. So it kind of goes from, I think it's like F to A, with A being the highest and F being the lowest. And the higher your dog level is, the more likely Hewie is to actually follow your commands. Because Hewie is a precocious little piece of shit. Like, he is a dog with his own will and his own mind. And particularly at the beginning of the game, he will very rarely actually listen to what you tell him to do.
This is the thing about Hewie. He's wonderful, delightful, an essential asset. He's a precious boy, but also that fucker just sometimes won't listen to you.
No.
You've got a puzzle where you have to have him sit somewhere or look for something in particular. You tell him to do it. He just sits there like an idiot.
Yeah.
You go around a corner and you suddenly hear him, like, very sadly howling because he can't find you. And it's like, bro, I'm here. it's an upsettingly realistic depiction of a dog akin to something like The Last Guardian, which is both great and also very fucking irritating.
Yeah, it's led on to one of the funniest and most consistent in-jokes that have resulted from the list, which is just me saying in desperation, where the fuck is Hewie?
Yeah.
Why is he fucking around?
We said this a lot in our original playthrough, because he just... Okay, in some cases, Hewie, my boy, my guy, I get it. You are a dog. You can't climb ladders.
Yeah.
You are less smart than a pig. Like, you really struggle with some things.
Yeah.
I get it, man. You don't know math. But...
Maths, please.
My guy... I do like Hewie, though, all things considered.
Yeah, so the thing with Hewie is that you'll be running around naturally trying to avoid these stalkers because you don't want to be chased because it takes a lot of time to get away from them and it's annoying and you use items and things like that.
Yeah.
But you'll come to realize that Hewie is just not very good at following you. And I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, because he will just stop. He'll just sit, and you'll be like, Hewie, we're going. We've got places to be. I've got to get this mandrake to the arm in the door. What are you doing?
Yeah. That being said, though, one thing I do enjoy, as part of that relationship system and that whole AI thing with Hewie, is that you can scold or praise him depending on his actions, which... The idea being that if you praise him, he will do more of the thing that he's just done, so he'll develop a behaviour for it, and the opposite in circumstances for scolding. It does actually affect the ending of the game.
Yes, it does, yes. You need to have a dog level of at least B to get a good ending in the game. But it's truly the thing that makes this game's environments come to life other than the reactive environments and stuff like that. Because your relationship with Hewie feels genuine.
Yeah.
You get frustrated with him, you praise him when he does things well. He really adds so much flavour to that game that I think it would feel lifeless without him.
I think I would legitimately like this game less if Hewie wasn't in it.
Yeah, 100%.
That feels very shallow for me to say, but I think otherwise it would just be a game where you run around as some girl in a spooky castle.
Yeah, it'd be a game just for me.
Yeah, it'd be Clock Tower 3 but less funny and with probably better themes. Because that is a thing, is this game does have a lot of care and attention to its storytelling. Half of the time, but
because the puzzles they have with Hewie are really fun and inventive. You have to make him go into certain doors so he can unlock things for you, or push boxes out of the way. You have to give him smells for him to track down so he can find certain items for you. It really uses Hewie in a way that's really inventive and really fun.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's a really good way of implementing this kind of mechanic.
Yeah.
Very much the consistent theme of Haunting Ground is, hey, do you remember Clock Tower? We figured out how to do it well.
Also, here's a dog.
Yeah.
Do you know why Huey's in the game?
Why is Hewie in the game?
It's because the developers didn't think anyone would buy a game where you play as a girl.
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. Hold on a second.
Yeah, what's your retort to that?
I forgot about fucking Tomb Raider.
Yeah, no, it's very silly, but they were literally concerned that people wouldn't buy a game where you're just a girl, so they were like, but what if she was a girl and a dog?
Oh, mate, well, you know what I think the most telling thing is Haunting Ground does indeed get referenced in other Capcom classics beyond Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, because Hewie makes a cameo in
Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 4. Hey, it's that dog. You know who that fucking dog is? It's Hewie.
It's precious Hewie.
It's precious fucking Hewie. That's why he's a white wolf.
Just to clarify, the reason why we keep saying precious Hewie is because Hewie's theme is called Precious Hewie.
Yeah, I think either the intro or outro of this episode it's gonna be Precious Hewie,
and the other one will be Endless Haunting Ground.
Is that what it's called?
That's what the first track on the soundtrack was called. It was called Endless Haunting Ground, and then there was Ultimate Haunting Ground.
Yeah, right. It's endless ...
Haunting Ground in full caps. Yeah. Yeah. So those are kind of the elements that form the core of Clock Tower. I almost said Clock Tower of Haunting Ground's gameplay. It's dog stalker puzzles, basically.
Yeah.
And when combined together, all right, I want to speak carefully here.
All right.
Because it does work. But when one element is focused upon to the detriment of the others, it becomes incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, it needs to be able to pick two in its triangle of mechanics, because when trying to do some of the Hewie puzzles relying on that AI, you know, love the thought behind it. It sounds like it has its own inbuilt solution to fix it, and it really doesn't.
I have a really good example of how to best describe how some of these games' elements don't quite cohere together.
Yeah.
So in the first level of the game, which is kind of the outer walls of the castle, there is a section in which you have to go to the outside of a room which has a hole in it and send Hewie in there. However, That area is located at the bottom of 2 ladders by the first time you get there. So you can't actually get Hewie there the way that you got there because he can't climb down ladders.
Yeah.
So you have to find a way to get all the way around with Hewie, making sure that he follows you the entire way and he doesn't stop and get distracted by something. Yeah. Get him over there. And then you stand there, right? This is a true story of my life. This is why I'm telling it with such passion. You're standing there and you're like, finally, Hewie, we're doing it. You're going in that hole. I go Hewie, and then suddenly I hear the chase music. And I'm being chased, and I can't interact with anything because Fiona will not touch anything while being chased.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to say, was the puzzles, you can't interact with the environment or really do any of the puzzles while a chaser is happening. So you have to try and lose the chaser, find somewhere to hide, see if you can get Hewie or one of your items to stun them long enough that you can do that. And it can send you just going round and round in circles trying to lose them.
And in this instance, you've gone round and round in circles. You finally escaped the chaser. It's taken 10 minutes of hiding behind doors and kicking him, but you've finally gotten away. Where the fuck is Hewie? I don't know where Hewie is. I've lost him. I now have to run around trying to find Hewie again.
Yeah, because he won't just, like, snap to you. Yeah, alright, I talked about, for some reason I talked about Star Wars Battlefront in the Geist episode. I want to make another comparison to Star Wars Battlefront.
Oh, classic.
Which,
fantastic.
Again, same year as this, 2005. There is a squad command mechanic that got simplified in Battlefront 2, which is you can have squad mates follow you. They will just snap to following you in a triangle formation whenever you do that. Better following AI, and I would love if Hewie had that in this game than what this game has, which is Hewie organically trying to rush around. And can I touch on upon this as well? When you're hiding, in a lot of circumstances, the camera will no longer be on where you're hiding. It will actually follow the stalker and where they're going. Adds a lot of tension for them trying to find where you are, and you're like, oh, they better not go down this way, this is where I am. But you can just see Hewie running around. Like, he's sometimes not even attacking the stalker, he's just going around.
And he oftentimes runs around them in circles, just like being like, oh, hello.
Yeah, he spent so much time near the stalker, and the stalker kind of has started to lose you. The camera snaps back to you while you're waiting for the music to kick back in to show that the stalker isn't there anymore. And you hear Hewie coming towards you, and every time I was thinking to myself, Hewie, you better not blow my fucking cover.
Yeah, because sometimes he will stand outside the thing you're hiding by looking at it.
Yeah,
and it's like, Hewie, shoot!
Please, right, I'm so glad you're finally here, Hewie, but come on, get a clue. Hewie, do get a clue. Yeah, I think when it's trying to combine all three of those, the fact that it makes the stalker combat, quote unquote, and the puzzle solving mutually exclusive, while also trying to put Hewie amidst them, it doesn't always mesh well.
That's the thing that I find fascinating about this game, though, is that I have now completed Haunting Ground 3 times. Please hold your applause. I have lived a full life. Thank you. And what I know is that each time I go through it, whether or not I enjoy it seems to be more a matter of luck than anything else.
Oh, just sort of like how much these things have come together to actually give you the experience that's ideally intended from Haunting Ground.
Because, like, rather inconveniently, when you and I were doing our playthrough in 2020, we were so unlucky with enemy placement and with Hewie's AI. Like, we just had so much frustration and difficulty getting it to work right.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it kind of colored our view of the game.
It definitely did. Because this ended up being a 3-session game.
Yes.
You know,
was this the first 3-session game?
I think it was, yeah, because Legend of K was 2, Geist was 2, and then Clock Tower and Shadow were 1.
Yeah.
So this took us 3 tries. 1 with the first Stalker, 1 with the second, and then the third one that we just blitzed through the final 2 just to basically get it out the way. Like, we seemed to be so... You seemed kind of crestfallen, and I just seemed kind of tired of it, where I was just like... Oh my god, who's this guy? Whatever, who cares? You know?
But, like, in preparation for this episode, because I wanted to give Haunting Ground its due and to do the best job that I could talking about it, I did a replay of the game a few weeks ago, and I had a wonderful time. Like, I got so lucky with the enemy placement and with my ability to solve the puzzles that I was kind of breezing through it and being like, oh, this game's actually... at its best, it's really reactive and dynamic and fun, and the environments are huge and complex, and the puzzles are inventive, and, like, I was really seeing a lot of the good side of it, even in the sections we didn't like later on.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know what? I feel like now I understand better that Haunting Ground is a game that it's trying a lot of different elements, and it doesn't always work, but when it does, you can see they had something there. Like, they had good ideas, and they execute upon them, but sometimes it just doesn't go right.
Yeah. I was wondering if you wanted to pivot into the presentation, because this game does look pretty damn good for a 2005 game.
I think, by my recollection, it's probably up there in terms of the best PS2 visuals I can think of.
Yeah, it's legitimately surprising. Like, again, it's with that no loading screens thing. That's kind of what takes me back with it the most, because some of the more artistic decisions are also very impressive.
Yeah.
But it's more the technical ability to be able to have this level seemingly loaded in its entirety, even though it's not really. It does a lot of like very clever smoke and mirrors to hide things, but it
never really is apparent though. It always feels completely like you're going through a normal area without any game stuff getting in the way, you know?
No, at no point is that illusion broken.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of playing something like the Resident Evil 4 reboot today, and I mean, even the Resident Evil 4 reboot has those slow
the big
door
doors
opening,
you have to push open.
Yeah, or like a God
and I
of
was
War
playing that
crack in the
game
wall.
on a PS4, so there was a lot of loading times in my version of the game.
Days, yeah. It's super impressive what they've done, and I do want to give credit to the design of the castle and some of the really interesting areas in it.
One of my big mantras about games, and especially about horror games, but I think that's about all media really, is that I think location is one of the most important elements to make something memorable or to make it interesting.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I like the Spencer Mansion or the police station or Silent Hill the town. Like, I think places that you can kind of get a feel for and a texture for is such an integral part of making a game tick and making a game feel interesting to me.
Definitely, because locale isn't just a visual style or a decision. It's a design element. It's a part of the gameplay, the level structure, the pacing, everything about it.
It kind of becomes a character in itself.
Precisely. And when you give it enough flavor as well, I think that really goes a long way. And some of the rooms in this castle are really, really wacky.
I was going to say, if we are going to rate Belly Castle in terms of the famous survival horror locations, I think it would rate very, very highly.
Oh, yeah.
And I think part of the reason for that is that it's so distinct. Like, Belly Castle is not a location that makes physical sense. Like, it's so disparate, and you go through areas and the rooms don't make any sense next to each other.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, very strange and bizarre, and really throws you off kilter when you go through a piano room and it leads straight into an armory, straight into a garden.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why would they build it like this? Why is it made like this? Who would make an area like this? What kind of mad mind would put together this architecture?
Yeah, that's the thing, because I can see a compelling argument to be made against that being just bad design. It's like, what the hell? There's no logical sense to how anything works. Surely a better game would design a realistic castle that feels like it's properly lived in. I think this does feel lived in. It's being lived in by a bunch of fucking weirdos.
Yeah, a bunch of wacky, crazy people who are absolutely off kilter.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to walk through my eye room, which has a trap in it, so that I can go into my kitchen to make myself my fucking hair pasta stew before walking into the grand dining hall. And while I'm at it, on the way to the bathroom, let me pass the fucking fish tank.
Yeah,
the fucking
exactly,
massive sharks that are going by.
So there are so many locations that I think about in this game when I try and remember it all, but one of my favorites is there's this outside veranda, like a corridor that connects two rooms to one another that you have to walk through. And as you're walking through one of them, you look down the corridor at the other end, and it's this kind of misshapen, bent, twisty corridor.
I'm glad you're talking about this, because this is the one I was going to say.
Yeah, and at the very end sits a small doll swinging on a little swing, backwards and forwards. And you're thinking to yourself, well, great, fantastic. Let's go down there. There can't be anything bad down there. So you walk down there, and as you do, the camera gets very tight to the owner as it kind of navigates this bendy, twisty corridor.
It's like claustrophobic.
It's very claustrophobic. You then open the door, and what do you see, my friends? You go into a lovely state bedroom, and sitting on a rocking chair, slowly rocking away, is another doll. And so, picture this, dear listeners. The camera is pointing towards the back of the room. So all you can see is a doll on a rocking chair and a doll in a birdcage. And you're already like, great, fantastic. I love what you've done with the place, Ricardo. Great work. You then press forward into the room, and then the camera shifts to the front of the room, and you can see along the window is 1,000 tiny dolls all placed watching you.
Jesus.
And I love that design, that visual makeup so much, because it's a horror that you have to press forward into yourself, and it becomes more and more horrifying the deeper you get yourself into it.
It's fucking weird. It's part of that feeling of being watched. The fact that even the inanimate objects are watching you. it's not even the only example of such an interesting place. There's loads of weird locales around the castle.
Really strange rooms.
Yeah.
It's cool as well because the first area, which is the outer area and kind of the guest areas, makes the most physical sense. And then the deeper you get into the castle and the more craven and weird it gets, it just like begins to unravel and stops making like, why is there a fish tank here?
Yeah.
Why am I in a massive cathedral next to a library? Like, what's going on with this place?
There's a almost, it's not 1-to-1, but it's very much an MC Escher style room.
With like staircases going up into nothing and the people standing upside down and things like that.
Yeah, you can see guys that are just like in other parts of the room that are just in areas that wouldn't physically make any sense.
It's so distinct and it's so unsettling. Like, you never feel like you're in a normal space here. Like, you never feel secure, even when you're in a safe area. It's still, this castle's just fucking weird, man. I don't want to be here anymore.
No, not at all. I even have to admit that I do enjoy some of the more kind of like classical castle elements as well.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about some of the puzzle rooms where there's like an automated trap that's just a knight with a crossbow that loads the crossbow, raises it, and shoots you at it.
Yeah.
Which, I have to say, bad luck on Fiona that she just doesn't
dodge out of the way. Yeah.
She doesn't duck at this slow moving crossbow firing.
Because you just got it aimed like squarely down the corridor. You could so easily just like step on one of the things and move out of the way.
Yeah, but then again, I guess in cutscenes, Fiona is the kind of person that is so timid.
Yes, she will sit there and watch as the horror comes towards her before trying to run away.
Yeah, whereas in the gameplay, naturally, you can control her, move her around, you can decide that you're going to trap a stalker against a wall and Hewie and start kicking them to death. It is kind of endearing in a way.
Yeah.
It's a part of games. It's the way that games can be.
I also really like how many traps there are in the castle. Like, this game really has a very classic adventure game feel, where it's like, welcome to my horrible castle, you will face my many traps.
It's the thing that I kind of miss about that Resident Evil 4 Hookman demo never coming to light.
Yeah.
Because I would have loved to have played something like that more often, and this game has a few elements of it still, given that it's retained the castle, as it were.
Yeah, and it's definitely got a lot of really classical, just like squashy wall traps or like bugs that eat you. Like, it's a real like Pharaoh's tomb type thing.
The bugs are funny. I think in the context of where they are, though, they're kind of dumb.
They are very silly.
It's a room where the whole idea is that there are two rooms that are mirrored and there's slight differences. You have to investigate the areas that are different from one another. And if you investigate the wrong area, bugs just come out of the walls and eat Fiona.
Yeah. They're just like a swarmer and just like completely devour her corpse. And it's like, oh god.
So how is it designed? What traps did the ancient bellies...
bugs like sitting there like, sticker boys? She looked at the chessboard. Let's talk about the cutscenes as well, because they're not quite Clock Tower 3 good, in which they aren't directed by the famed film director who made Battle Royale, whose name we never think to look up.
Oh no, yeah.
But they are very unsettling. They're very weird.
Yeah. But that's to its kind of benefit.
Exactly, yeah. They kind of they very much play into this game's themes of voyeurism and kind of being watched and violated in certain ways. Like, there's a particular cutscene at the start of the game. So for the record, there are 4 chasers in the game, and the second chaser is a maid called Daniella.
Yeah.
But what's really neat about Daniella is that she actually appears throughout the first section of the game, not as a threat, but as kind of an ally. Like, she gives you your clothes. She kind of like leads you around a little bit. You just see her around quite a lot before she then becomes a stalker later on in the game. But there's this weird cutscene where you're like sleeping on a bed because you've eaten this pasta she's made you that made you really tired because it's like poisoned or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's like running her hand against Fiona's sleeping body, and every time her fingers brush up against her, the controller rumbles.
Yeah.
And it's really effective at just making you feel gross, of just being like, oh god.
It does. Jesus Christ. All right.
The cutscenes go hard, is what I'm saying.
The cutscenes go hard. Feel free to screenshot. And if you don't, then there'll be a gallery at the end of the game that you can unlock the cutscenes in, because fucking every game used to have that.
So we can watch the "Let Me Into Your Womb" cutscene as much as our heart desires.
I did not expect him to say it like that. I thought he'd be more like a Clock Tower boss. I thought he would be more theatric about such a silly line.
Do you want to give me a rendition, Connor?
Oh, he was just like, "Let me into your womb." And it was like, oh, that's kind of
all
plain.
Right.
Like, that's very matter of fact. That's like saying, "Give me my car keys. I'm going to the shops."
There are some cutscenes in the game that are so kind of gross and horrible that you don't even see them on the first playthrough.
No. Oh, yes. Because some of them you have to unlock on the second, which is an interesting decision.
I'm really not sure if the motivation there is we don't want people to see these who are reviewing the game. Because
probably.
The two that I know is one of them is one of the stalkers has you captive and he is prodding at your genitals.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
And then the other one is an old man making out with a corpse.
Yeah, fair.
It does also make it very weird that those are a bonus.
Yeah,
It's like, congratulations, you get to see these awful scenes.
Like, don't you want to see this?
Check this out.
Guess
Intrepid
what, loyal
Haunting
fan?
Ground fan.
Oh, Jesus. This is the problem, though, right, with this kind of thing, because there are times where this game has a very, very good way of making you feel uncomfortable by these kinds of things. There are other times where it kind of layers it on too thick of, well, this is for your enjoyment, viewer, player.
Check this out. Although, but is it not interesting to think that the game is saying that the enemies are villainous because they want to invade Fiona's privacy in this way, but they also go, but you want to see, don't you?
Yeah, that's the thing. Which
I'm not sure if it's clever or not. Sometimes I feel like they're kind of trying to point out that we are just as creepy as the stalkers are. But then at other times it's like, here's the cowgirl outfit. She's wearing like a sick bra. It's like...
There's the one that's called...
illegal in some states.
Yeah, illegal in some states where you get a whip. You get a dominatrix whip.
And then there's the really sexy one where you're a frog.
Oh...
Really got my heart pumping.
Yeah. Oh, man. But, that's the thing. I feel like I want to be the cynic in those circumstances and say that while this game does a really good job of layering on these themes quite thick, of saying, hey, we're exploring this, I think that it is trying to have its cake and eat it too. I just don't trust developers in this time period, or...
No, see, I'm the anime fan being like, no, the boob window is a representation of how she opens her heart to people.
That's true. That's the thing, because you pointed this out to me. Fiona's uncomfortable by this whole situation. She gets given clothes to wear after being left basically naked in the castle. Why does she put the choker on?
Well, you gotta look stylish, man.
She thinks she looks cute. Yeah.
She's fashion conscious, okay?
That's true, that's true. Do we want to jump towards box art? Because I want to look at the box art and say nothing about this is particularly like...
No.
It's just a picture of Fiona's face and Hewie in the corner, and there's like the logo at the bottom, and it's quite a stark kind of grayscale.
I think it's
picture.
quite nice.
Yeah, I love how it looks. It's clearly not using the fact that this...
Yeah, it's not like Onechabura where it's like, look at this hot girl, you could be a hot girl. Like, that's what makes me feel like they're not trying to be that skeevy about it, because they're not trying to use it to sell the game.
No.
Like, in a way that I feel like they should be, if that's what they were trying to do.
But
also, I just want to point out that this game is rated 16 for fist. There is no sex in this game.
For violence.
For violence, yeah.
How the fuck?
I don't know. Because for reference, whenever Peggy rates something, they'll have like a little logo on the back where it's like drugs or violence or sex. And there's apparently no sex in this game.
I want to stress that Shadow the Hedgehog is a warning for bad language. They say damn.
Damn.
Yeah.
The box art is also consistent amongst regions, I believe.
Oh, is it?
So it's the same box art in Japan, the same box art in America.
Yeah.
However, there is one difference, which is that the game is not called Haunting Ground in Japan.
No, it's not. It is called Demento.
Demento, which is a much more appropriate name.
It's a significantly better name.
Once again, I can only stress there are no ghosts in this game. There is no haunting of any grounds.
No, not at all. The Luminescence, are they kind of ghosts? I guess. But this game has more representation of golems in it than it does of ghosts.
Well, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. So shall we talk about the game's music, which isn't going to be a massive section. It's not music you're supposed to listen back to, I don't think.
Yeah, this, after our playthrough, I couldn't remember a single track from this game except for Precious Hewie, faintly. And even on the replay, I'm kind of thinking to myself, oh yeah, they're doing the Silent Hill thing of having a few songs that are just kind of noise. They're just kind of banging, clanging, like, so grating things.
Precious Hewie is Hewie's theme, obviously, but it's also the game's theme. They play Precious Hewie throughout a lot of the game's big moments, like when you're leaving and stuff like that. The other Stalker themes... Okay, so there are 4 Stalkers. One of the themes is good, and it's Daniella's, and it's not memorable, but it's like... It's this weird electronic whirring, and then a woman going,
Yeah, it's appropriate.
Yeah.
It's sort of... It makes me think of Kill Leonard from Silent Hill 3.
Sure, yeah.
I think it's called Kill Leonard.
I don't know how it goes.
Because that one also has the sounds of a man moaning in it.
Debilitas is just this weird boom boom, boom boom, boom boom, boom boom, boom boom. And then, like, Ricardo's is just this, like, and that's the whole song.
It feels like it's a 4-second loop.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because Daniella's is appropriate.
I think Daniella's is a part of why I like her so much. Because it's just a really weird, discordant track that, like, goes along with her themes, because it's a combination of the robotic screeching noises with a woman's voice.
Yeah. But the rest, I think a lot of the other music is kind of unmemorable. It's probably good atmosphere, ambiance music.
Yeah,
but
it's appropriate, but it's not. It doesn't really ever go beyond what you'd expect from this kind of game.
Yeah.
Apart from all the boss themes, which go hard. Because they're all this kind of like, oh, and then they go, boom, 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 boom. That's like this weird techno music. Like, it's really strange.
So, do we want to talk about the levels?
Yes, I would very much like to talk about the levels, because they all have something about them that I find interesting at the very least.
Yeah. This is us kind of like running down the rest of the story as well, really.
Yeah.
So, a little bit like the Clock Tower episode, but...
Well, it's very similar, because it is just, we're going to do it by Stalker.
Mm.
This is this guy's level, this is this guy's level, here's what happens, basically, stuff like that.
Yeah, pretty
Although
much.
we will probably speak a little bit more positively than, what was Kuroda's level like? Ah, it sucked, it was stupid, it was like 4 rooms in a sewer.
That much is true,
Yeah.
yeah. So, on that topic then, let us open up with the first stalker, whose name is Debilitas.
Debilitas. So, it's a little difficult to talk about Debilitas, because I feel like we have to do so sensitively, in a way that the game does not do itself.
Oh, right, because his entire gist is that he's someone who is the kind of trope of the impaired, troubled...
Like mentally handicapped
Yeah.
character, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the best way to put it. We're kind of jumping around the topic because it's like, you're quite right, the game...
You know exactly what we mean.
Because it's not specific, it's never like told precisely what's up with Debilitas, but the main gist of him is that he's someone who is not very smart and not strictly in like a, just hasn't been educated way. Yeah.
I think the game always describes him as childlike.
Yeah, because that's what they really bring home with Debilitas, is that he's very childlike.
Yeah,
He's...
So honestly, his entire motivation for chasing Fiona, well, this is the thing I find interesting about him. I've got this written in my little notes, is that he's not necessarily hostile to you, quote unquote, in the way that he wishes you harm.
Yeah.
His entire motivation for chasing you is that he's basically playing with a doll in a corridor.
Yeah.
And he throws it down the corridor and goes to retrieve it, and he sees Fiona. And there's this really great cutscene where he's looking at his doll, and he looks at Fiona, and he's like, well, that's way better. I mean, that's a way cooler doll.
I've just seen a Barbie after playing with like baby dolls.
Yeah, my little ragdoll character
Yeah.
that I've got here. So he wants Fiona because he sees her as a doll and he wants to play with her, and by playing with her, breaking her.
Yeah. Yeah, because he is incredibly strong, and
he's huge. He's hench. He's built like a gorilla. He's gigantic.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the biggest character in the game. Yeah,
biggest character of my heart.
I mean, do you reckon he's got a big heart?
I think so, because he's got a lot of love to give. A little too much, some would say.
That tends to be the result of if you get caught by Debilitas, which is the death sounds whenever you die.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Like
Yeah.
they're all horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I don't remember exactly what Debilitas is, but it's just this, like, horrible, like, Fiona being killed off-camera sound, and it's really unsettling.
Yeah, you hear the sounds of, like, bones breaking and flesh tearing and that kind of thing as, Debilitas uses her as an incredibly large doll. At least that's my way of interpreting it.
Yeah. But when he's chasing you, he says, my dolly.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
I forgot that he says anything at all.
They all do, I think.
I know he's got sounds, but... Yeah, and that's kind of where the large chunk of, I suppose, the castle proper is Debilitas' level.
So I always think of it as it's the castle outskirts, so you're going around kind of the walls of the castle quite a lot, and then it's a lot of guest rooms, a lot of like dining rooms, kitchens, workers' quarters, things like that. So I always very much perceive it as being the front-facing end of the castle, where you would have guests, where people would see, like, a lot more of the things you'd expect from a castle as well. I think that's the part of the game where it's the least weird, and it's the most, we're in a big cathedral, or we're in a big, like, foyer of a castle, you know? It makes the most sense.
Well, Debilitas is a worker.
Yeah, he's the groundskeeper.
Exactly, yeah. I was going to say, he mainly tends to the garden and the outsides, as it were. You find him inside the castle too, but I don't think he's supposed to be there, really.
No, and there's a great section. There's a good few cutscenes at the start of the game, which I think are actually some of the most appealing, because they show the characters... And by the characters, I mean the stalkers interacting with each other.
Yeah.
So there's actually a part where you're being chased by Debilitas where Ricardo, one of the game's later stalkers and one of the actual heirs to the Belly legacy, he basically yells at Debilitas and he's like, but Debilitas, stop chasing this girl around! And then he apologizes to you for his brutish behavior.
Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of them showing how they kind of live with one another, which is a weird thing to think about.
Yeah. It's really fun to see that kind of interconnectivity. You know, wouldn't have made any sense for it to be in Clock Tower, but that would have been fun in Clock Tower.
Oh, to see Kuroda and Chopper hanging out.
Yeah, but that's probably because I secretly want a subordinates...
like a Persona game, you have a social link with Kuroda.
Yeah. I was more thinking just a sitcom. I just want to see
that'd be
those
good,
characters
yeah.
hanging out. If the subordinates in a Persona game would be very fucking funny. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So
But
a lot of Debilitas' sections are him chasing you. He's very brutish and silly. He's kind of like the most quote-unquote pure chaser, in which he'll just see you and chase you down.
yeah,
He doesn't really have any tricks that he likes to do. He just chases you.
yeah.
And as a result, it's quite easy to get away from him because he's not very smart, basically.
But this is also the section where that doll room is in. The
Yeah.
weird, because that reflects upon Debilitus's youth is like
His childlike
yeah,
nature, yeah.
exactly, yeah.
No, some of my favorite rooms in the game are in Debilitas' section, like the doll room or the shack that he lives in, or
Yeah.
the cathedral, or like I actually really, really enjoy it. I think it might be the best part of the game in terms of its puzzle design. Like the puzzles in Debilitas' area are all very intricate, and the level has a lot of verticality, so there's a lot of different floors that you have to try and navigate through to get to certain areas.
I suppose as well, I want to comment as well about Debilitas, which is that he's probably the most well-intentioned of any of the stalkers in the game.
Yeah.
And in fact, if my memory serves me right, he's the only stalker in the game where you have an option to not actually kill him.
Yeah, so I don't want to get onto the boss fight just yet, because there's two cutscenes that I want to talk about that I
Right.
find interesting.
Yeah.
So the first one is you can look through a keyhole, and you'll see in there that Ricardo is just beating Daniella senseless, trying to interrogate her.
Yeah.
But because she can't feel pain, she just sits there and smiles at him as her face begins to bleed, and it's very unsettling. I really like that one.
Yeah. It's because you're just like, Jesus Christ, okay, this is how the supposed masters of this sort of castle treat the servants and the like. It's no wonder it's Debilitas and Daniella are the only people here.
Yeah, because like that's also the point in the game in which they're trying to quote unquote pull the wool over your eyes, where they're like, "Is Ricardo on your side? What's going on?" But then you
Yeah.
realize, no, this guy is a freak and a monster. Like,
Oh well,
and that's why we get to talk about. This is the second cutscene
Yeah,
that I was talking about, Connor.
Oh, this is really fucking funny. Do you want to talk about it, or shall I?
I will talk about the statue cutscene.
All right.
So, you've navigated your way through to the bottom level of Belly Castle. At this point in the game, Daniella has not been a threat to you. She's just kind of off-putting.
Yeah.
And Ricardo has been nice, and he also speaks to you with a lot of respect. He kind of tells you that you're the mistress of the castle because you're part of the Belly line, so the castle is technically yours. And he's like, "Oh, whatever we can do to make your stay more comfortable, let us know." Like, he's very deferential to her at the start.
Yeah.
However, this all changes when you reach his library, because you enter into this room. A soft piano is playing, and you can see a key on a table at the very end of the room. However, as you go to walk to it and begin picking up the key, the piano suddenly has this kind of crash, and like he presses all the keys at once, and he begins speaking to you, and he's like, "Fiona, I've made you this really cool thing under this sheet. Pull off the sheet and see what it is." And what is it, Connor?
Well, Fiona pulls the sheet off from the thing that's just under the covers, and she finds a statue of herself sitting on the couch, but she's pregnant. And it's made of pink clay or stone or something like that, and it's like a perfect recreation of her. She kind of like jumps back in shock, and Ricardo says something effectively along the lines of, "Cool, huh?
Yeah, what do you think?"
Like, hey.
What he says that I really like is that he says, "It's beautiful, isn't it? Go ahead, you may touch it."
Like, oh,
And Fiona's like,
yeah.
"Oh, thank God, I can give this a good rub down."
Yeah, she doesn't, but it's a thing of like,
Because he also says that he's like, "This will be your future." It's like, oh God, like, take me to dinner first. Like Jesus
bro,
Christ.
okay. Yeah, don't do that on Tinder. I photoshopped a picture of you pregnant.
What do you think? Swipe right?
This is why you can't send pictures on Tinder. But because honestly, the details of the rest of the kind of Debilitas level is relatively hazy to me. It's just mainly the small sections we've talked about before going into the boss fight.
Yeah.
So, does it take place in the cathedral?
It takes place. So there are two cathedrals. There's one which is near the entrance to the castle, which has this very grand staircase and this massive statue in the middle, which I think is a really cool looking room.
Yeah.
And then there's a cathedral that you reach by going through the dark room, where you have to use Hewie to go along the invisible path, and that leads you into this like very specific like. This is a cathedral that people pray in, basically. They're like, it has like pews and like an altar at the top and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you have to quote unquote fight Debilitas. So the reason why I'm being a little unsure of my language there is that there are two ways of defeating him. The first is to fight him conventionally, which is to get Hewie to attack him or to kick him or to use your powder and things like that. And so you've done enough damage that he basically falls down literally dead. You have killed him.
Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom. The other one is that along the walls are 2 switches that you can either kick or have Debilitas charge, and once both of them are broken, a chandelier will fall on him. It's really weird though, because it's not that the chandelier knocks him out or like traps him in some way, it's that it knocks him over and he's like, oof, owie, my head. And then he looks at Fiona and she just so happens to be caught in this angelic divine light. And she looks like an angel and she's beautiful.
Yeah.
It switches Debilitas' vision of her as a toy to an angel. And she's like, oh, I must respect you now. I can't touch because you're too divine for me. So he starts like bowing to you, basically.
Yeah, I remember distinctly him bowing.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, he just kind of lets you go, and he returns to his work as the groundskeeper.
Well, that's the thing. That's why he's interesting, because he's not hostile to you. And once you show him this perception of yourself, he becomes not an ally, but he's like neutral to you. He's just like, well, I have no reason to hurt you. Yeah. So
if you go back to his shack afterwards, he gives you an item.
He does. He does give you an item.
In fact, he drops to his knees, and I think he prays.
And he like offers it to you, like in his hands, like, here, accept this offering.
Yeah. And it's just like, oh, okay, well, that works out well.
Yeah. The second stalker kind of strikes me in a very personal way.
Yes.
So do you want to introduce Daniella the maid?
Certainly. She's the housekeeping maid of the castle grounds, and she can be found across several sections of the game, just cleaning and such. In fact, there are cutscenes quite early on as well where she makes you dinner. It's a very creepy cutscene where she's made Fiona these huge amount of pasta.
Yeah, it's like Fiona's sitting at this very grand dining table, like one of those really long ones with all the chairs around it, and there's like 9 bowls of pasta around her, and she eats a single bite and goes, well, thank you for the meal, and then just runs away.
Yeah, she does. She just completely leaves. And the implication as well is that there's like human hair in the pasta.
I think the fan theory I read is that it's Fiona's mother's hair who died in the car crash beginning the game's events.
But it's something that's a deliberate decision by Daniella. She wanted Fiona to eat that for one reason or another, which I swear there's like other horror fiction that do that kind of thing.
Crisis Core.
Does Crisis Core do it?
He's eating my hair!
Oh, right. Well, unfortunately, unlike hit anime My Hero Academia, Fiona does not gain the superpowers of her mother
she
by
just
eating
becomes
the hair.
very tired.
And she passes out in the bed chamber that's been set aside for her, which is when we get the very creepy cutscene of Daniella.
Yes, so they're kind of setting it up beforehand. So after Fiona leaves the dining room with the pasta, Daniella kind of looks at where Fiona was sitting and she just sort of says to herself, I am not complete. And then that's when it leads into you going to bed and her beginning to sort of run her hand down your body.
Yeah. It's also a section of the game, that small bit when you're ill and you're trying to go to bed, where you can't run. And that filled me with legitimate fear, because I was thinking to myself, oh dear God, if Daniella turns around and tries to kill me now, I'm fucked. Thankfully,
I
not
am fully
the case.
at her mercy.
Yeah. Like, I'm not sure what I can do with Hewie. I don't think I can command Hewie.
I don't think so, no. She would just, when you tried to kick, she would just sort of like shake her leg and go, oh, I'm too tired.
Yeah. It is during that cutscene where Daniella basically feels Fiona up.
Because like she's kind of running her hand across the course of Fiona's body, but she's not quite touching her, so she's kind of like going across her chest and up and down like that.
Yeah, but it goes down.
Yeah.
So that,
Well, she touches her stomach.
Where
her womb is.
Okay, the way that it cut made me think she was doing something significantly worse, and I would not have put it past Haunting Ground to have done it.
No. So she's just touching her stomach.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is that Daniella is an artificial woman.
Yeah.
So apparently, I was reading some lore about this. Apparently, Daniella is not actually an artificial woman. She's a girl that Lorenzo kidnapped and did some weird science on.
Okay.
Which that might be on the wiki, that might be the actual story. That's not how I feel it should be. I think she's an artificial woman because that makes more sense with how she is.
She's like a very advanced homunculus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think the implication is that Debilitas is the first attempt they made to make an artificial person, and then they were like, "This isn't quite right."
I see. Well, yeah, obviously. But yeah, I can see that with Daniella as well. Because there's a lot of artificial life stuff. Like, I briefly mentioned golems. There's golem puzzles in this game.
Yeah.
We'll talk
Hot
more.
golem puzzles.
Hot golem puzzles that we'll talk about.
What it is that Daniella can't feel.
No.
She can't feel any emotion and she can't feel pain.
She also can't taste. That's something she does with the pasta as she tries to eat it. And
she's like, can't do nothing.
Yeah.
And she's also infertile.
Yeah. Yeah, she can't have children. Which Fiona, being a completely ordinary woman, very much can. And it's something that Daniella has an envy of. And so Daniella goes up to a window, smashes her head against it a couple times, takes one of the largest pieces of glass from it, and starts chasing you.
And thus begins what I would describe as the best section of the game. Because I think in the ranking of horror villains, Daniella might be my favorite, if not at the very least in the top 10 or the top 5.
Wow.
I really like Daniella. I think she's incredibly spooky and creepy, and like, I just don't like her. She's just so horrible to me. Like, I really find her disturbing in a certain way.
Well, the thing that kicks off her even making you dinner and such is that you're trying to go through a door, and you go to take the key that you've gotten from exploring the castle, put it in, and legitimately in the castle, she just grabs Fiona's hand and says, it's time for dinner.
She says, dinner is served, miss. And then she leans in really close and just goes, dinner is served, miss. And it's just like
a second time, like, oh, jeez. And yeah, at that point, running away from her leads you into an entirely new part of the castle.
Yeah, although there is the part where once you're trying, because like you're trying to get to the next area through this wooden staircase-looking place with like this staircase going down, and she takes you back to the dining room, which is an earlier area in the game, and then you have to run back to that area to get back to the door you're trying to get through.
I see. Okay.
And when you're going through it, Daniella is there, and she's just cleaning.
She's
standing there just like scrubbing some wood, and she's just, you talk to her and she goes, it's cleaning time, miss, and she doesn't chase you at all.
Yeah, after she's gone after you, you lost her, you go back there, she's there, you think, oh Jesus, but no, she's completely preoccupied by her tasks. Those are priority one at this moment in time.
And then you go into the next area, and what happens is that you're going up these stairs, and Fiona trips, and Daniella starts walking up, and she's just got her big shard of glass, and it's all very threatening and imposing, and she's great. But she then walks past a mirror.
Yes.
She then sees herself, and it causes her to freak the fuck out. Like, she clearly does cannot stand her own reflection, and she has to break the mirror violently to get the image out of her, out of view.
I presume the first mirror that's in Fiona's room, she's disassociated enough that she's not really perceiving herself in that moment. Whereas I believe in this mirror, she very much is taken notice of the fact that she is who she is, and she is horrified, disgusted, and 1,000 other emotions all curled up into one.
So this is kind of like, this is touching upon why I find Daniella to be such a satisfying villain for me personally, which is that, number one, as a trans woman, surprise, if none of you realize that the girl with the white hair and all the art is meant to be me, that is me. Connor is a cat. As a trans woman, I don't necessarily think this is handled particularly sensitively, because it's like, a woman without a womb is driven to insanity.
Yeah.
But as a character who is chasing femininity to such a degree that it's driven her insane, I find that upsetting. I find that unsettling. That really strikes at my core of like, oh god, that really hits me quite hard.
It's horror.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, it's personal for me. The same thing with the mirrors, because I have like a phobia of mirrors. Like, I don't like my own reflection. So like, a character who like personifies those traits that I have that are very deep and dear to me really kind of gets me. That's why I find Daniella so effective, basically.
Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting part of the game as well. Like, Daniella might be one of the most fleshed out of them. She may not have the most backstory. Like, there's, I suppose, the other two kind of later stalkers do.
Yeah.
She's the one that feels like it's the best executed focus of this, and it's the one that maybe there's a slight bit of bias because I've played it with yourself, and this is something that's really special to you. But I think I do agree with that. I think there's a compelling case to make the same argument about Debilitas, but I think Daniella is more interesting because Debilitas is never distracted by another task in the game. As soon as you meet Debilitas, you're worried that he's someone that is going to be out to get you, and every time you run into him, he's a threat until his boss fight. But Daniella isn't. Daniella is a completely benign resident up until she becomes the stalker, and even then, sometimes she just turns up.
Yeah, and she's just cleaning, and you just look at her, and she's like, I'm cleaning now.
Yeah. She's also, compared to Debilitas, another case where you can really see how she's suffering. Debilitas deserved better than the life he got, but he doesn't seem to be...
He seems content.
Content is the word. Yeah, content's the word I was looking for. Whereas you see Daniella getting beaten the fuck up by Ricardo for...
And she has like scars all over her hands as well, like loads of tiny little scars in a way that it's like, is she like cutting herself to try and feel pain? Like, clearly she's like she feels empty inside. Like, she doesn't feel real.
Yeah, it's either that or she exposes herself to damages that she can't sense. Like, it's just something that doesn't register for her. And
she pursues you in a way that's so much more scary to me than Debilitas, because Debilitas isn't very smart, obviously. So he's kind of clumsy and oafish. He's got two animations we didn't talk about. One is the one where he scratches his groin at you.
Oh, right.
And then the other one, he does this, like, he like lifts his hands up and goes like that. Like, he's kind of doofy in that way. Whereas Daniella is like a cold, calculated. She is hunting you the fuck down.
Yeah.
She has this huge shard of glass, and she walks down each corridor like with this like high heeled like dunk, dunk, like really slowly and robotically, and it's just like.
Yeah. Well, I think something that's interesting about all four stalkers is the progression of their hunter intelligence, I suppose. Debilitas isn't entirely urge. Daniella is someone who can be cold and logical, but she's very emotionally driven.
Yeah.
Despite the fact
Very
that she
unstable.
can't. Yeah, exactly. And then the later two are more of the kind of masterminds behind everything. The latter of which, the final one being the head of the Belly Castle entirely. So I would say that he's the most trickstery in that, like, he makes himself physically unimposing and then uses that to surprise
exactly,
you.
Yeah. Like, there are three things about Daniela that I really like. The first is that she closes doors behind her. So when you're going through the environment, you'll open doors, and you want doors to be as open as possible because then you can go through areas quickly. But when Daniela's searching, she will close them behind her, meaning that when you're running from her, you have to open them again.
And it's in character.
Yeah.
She's keeping the place in order. She's probably going through there being like, God, was this woman born in a barn? And like shutting the doors behind her. But...
And like, the second thing is that she cleans, because that happens throughout her section. Like, there's like one room where she's just always cleaning, and you're just like, you can talk to her and she'll give you an item that you need to beat the game.
Yeah, there's and that goes against everything that I would be doing in these kinds of games. It's like, why the fuck would I talk to the like okay, the one time, right, at the very beginning of her section where you find her and she's cleaning and you talk to her and it's like, oh, that's weird. That feels like a one-off. Every other time she's cleaning, I want to leave her the fuck alone. The fact you have to go to her to progress is like,
Well, the thing is that you don't need that item to progress. It just makes the Mandrake section less bullshit.
Right.
Because you can find the right one just by guessing.
Okay, it's just easier if you do that.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's risk reward almost. Yeah.
The third thing I like about Daniela is that she uses hiding points.
Does she?
Yeah, no, she was in that cupboard, remember?
Oh, you're right.
Like, there's a room where you open the cupboard and she's in there and she's like, guess who, fucker?
Fucking hell. I mean, the hiding point thing is something that I wanted to talk about from earlier. Because there's one hiding point in particular that is very funny to me. I don't think we triggered it, but it's really funny to me in concept. One of the puzzle rooms in the Daniela section has a furnace in it. It's activated by a lever.
No, so it's not a furnace, it's an Iron Maiden.
It's an Iron Maiden,
Yeah,
okay. And you can go into the Iron Maiden to potentially hide from her. Daniela can activate the Iron Maiden and kill you.
Yeah, she will. She'll just be like, guess what, idiot?
Because she finds you. She knows you're in there. And
that's the thing that I think makes her more affecting than Debilitas, is that she's driven and intelligent, and she'll use the environment to kind of manipulate you and try and bamboozle you in certain ways.
Yeah. I also just think the environment design is interesting because the castle starts to get even weirder.
So this area is called the Old Mansion.
Which I find a weird name because it doesn't look like a mansion to me.
No, it's very strange, but that's kind of what it's called. And this is where the game just gets kind of buck wild with its environments. Yeah. You go through this one corridor, and then there's a massive statue of a mammoth that's crashing through a wall.
Yeah, it's like trunk is splayed over the pathway that you walk over. There's a carousel area.
There's a bathroom that's underwater with giant fish in it.
Yeah, you look out the window and you just see this big shark go by. And Fiona comments that it looks like something that came from prehistoric times.
Yeah, like from a museum that she saw. Yeah.
It's a very odd sort of like part of the game.
This is the area with the two mirrored rooms with the bugs.
Yeah.
And this is the room where you'll find Daniela stoking a flame, and if you try and hide, that's when Fiona will say, "She's right there, stupid."
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at her as well, she changes her weapon from a shard of glass to a fire poker.
Yeah.
And her having the fire poker changes her AI.
Oh, it makes her like...
Well, she becomes more unstable. Like, she becomes quicker and she does more damage, but she won't look for you as thoroughly as she used to because she's gone too far off the edge.
That's very fascinating as a trade-off. Oh my goodness. That's like a really interesting part that they play around with it. It's a really well executed part of these stalker mechanics. I just look at Clock Tower 3 and I'm like, listen, Clock Tower 3, I love you, but this is
Yeah, this game is just that game but competent. That's that game but done well.
Yeah. I worry I'm hitting the drum a bit too hard on that, but you're completely right on it.
And that's when you get to the MC Escher stairs, where it's the stairs that are going into nowhere. And then that leads to another fish tank, which leads to a library, and it's just like, what the
Oh, and it has that guy in it. There's just a homunculus guy that's just, like, naked with no genitals, that's just standing there looking at some computers going... and you can kick him and he goes, ooh! Yeah. And then just goes back to looking at the computers.
Well, if you kick him 3 times, he attacks you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, he slaps you, I think. Because you kick him right in the groin.
I mean, he ain't gonna feel nothing about it.
Yeah.
No dick or ball. Listen, we've been talking about wombs all day.
That's right, that's true. This is the womb game.
Let the dicks have something for once.
Finally, a win for the men.
A win for men, finally. Where's the haunting ground for men? Where's the haunting ground with chest hair? Damn it.
What was that called? Like
Gaunting Hound.
Yeah, sorry, that was for some reason after we finished the game we spent some time reading some fan fiction.
We found haunting ground fan fiction, of which there's like 100 of them.
Yeah, and they're all just what if Daniella and Fiona kissed. And then one of them was what if it was a gender swapped version where Fiona was a dense hunk man and she had chest hair. We basically played Daniella's section in its entirety today.
Yeah, I don't think there was much more.
It's a good section. It's got lots of fun puzzles. There's a bit where you have to lead one of the luminescents to a lantern to light it up that I thought was quite inventive.
Yeah, that's a way better of doing that kind of concept than Clock Towers. Guess what? The moth got you, idiot.
Guess what, dummy.
Is that you can lure them into somewhere else for a benefit.
And it stops them spawning as well.
Yeah, which is great. It's like a permanent solution.
There's also this room. So with the mirrored room, what you have to do is you have to go between each room, figuring out what it is that's different in the other room and then examining it.
Yeah.
And that opens up 3 different pathways for each item that you find. And down one of those corridors, there's this weird stone room, and there's a statue of an angel peeking out like this. Like looking like, oh.
Oh, jeez.
And it's just like, what is going on here? Like, that's one of those things where it makes no sense, but it's so evocative in a way where it's like, what is this statue hiding from?
What it's making me think of, because for one, we know there's an angel imagery with Fiona with Debilitas. And there's also this idea that Daniella doesn't feel like she is a complete woman and that kind of thing.
Mood.
She doesn't like mirrors. She hides from her own reflection. And the way that you ultimately defeat Daniella, which is the weird moon laser block thing.
It's a weird concept.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like that angel's evocative of how she's hiding away from light, from imagery, from reflection, from being recognized and seen and such.
But feeling content with herself.
Yeah. Anyway, her boss fight's fucking stupid.
Her boss fight is... Alright, so it's got a similar vibe to some of the later sections in Clock Tower 3, where they were thinking, we don't have that many mechanics in this game, how are we going to have a boss fight? So what you need to do, right, so you're in this kind of... I guess it's like a foyer, it's like a...
Yeah.
It's like a big skylight, basically, with the moon shining down.
Yeah.
And there are these 4 blocks that need to be pushed onto buttons.
Yeah.
So the whole boss fight is basically you just getting Hewie to distract Daniella while you push the blocks on.
Yeah.
Although I do need to talk about the cutscene prior to her boss fight, because she says, I'm going to quote it in full, because it's fucked up. Blood, flesh woman, you vile creature. You lure the filthy man into your body again and again, and you are allowed to do this because you are a precious little princess. And it's just like, Daniella, I mean.
And that's when it becomes apparent that what she wants from you is your goddamn womb.
Needs me a womb.
Because she can't create life. She can't, she's infertile. She wants what Fiona has, which is the ability to reproduce. That's what she feels like is what makes her a woman, which...
I wish it was that easy.
But ultimately, the end of that fight, once you assemble the blocks all together, is the death of Daniella, as it's... For some reason, the blocks being together forces a big moonlight to shine down on her.
I think the implication is that turning on the buttons increases the intensity of the moonlight. Like, it's kind of like putting filters over it to like focus the beam of the moon's light.
Yeah.
And what this does is that it makes the glass of the skylight incredibly reflective. So after you've pushed the blocks together, the circle in the middle will light up and you have to get Daniella to walk over it.
Yeah.
And then I think she like looks up and sees herself and then screams so loudly that it breaks the glass on above her.
Yeah.
The glass then shatters all around and she's like spinning in the air like, it's so beautiful. And then, of course, an incredibly long shard of glass pierces her right through the stomach.
She canonically dies the exact same way as Dr. Nick in the Simpsons movie.
Yeah, although I do know that in this instance, I think the glass very specifically goes through her stomach where her womb would be.
Oh, yeah. All right. I just assumed it was just through the chest. That makes way more sense, yeah.
The greatest detail of all is that she dies with a smile on her lips.
Yeah, I think Fiona even comments that maybe she's happy because it's the first time that she's felt something, which is very dark. And as you say, Fiona, despite all of that, still pities her in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Fiona, when you look at her corpse, she kind of says she regrets having to kill her, I think is the thing she says.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm sorry I had to come to this. Like, I know you obviously weren't a very healthy person, but I'm still sorry that it went this way.
Yeah.
Like, she still has sympathy for these people. She understands their plight, and that's what I like about her, I guess.
Yeah. And so, at that point in time, Fiona decides to leave Daniella be, takes Hewie, and continues off to find her way out of the castle, which would be a wonderful ending. However, this is a game of two halves.
Oh, you turned it around on me.
This is unfortunately the half of the game where the developers should have maybe stopped.
Yeah.
Because I think we said this about Clock Tower 3, which is that Clock Tower 3, you get to its middle, and it just
completely... like it has a structure and then it just gives it up.
Yeah, it gives up on its structure. That's what makes Clock Tower a game of two halves, is that it's consistently entertaining, but it had a clear structure and premise, and then just gave up to just be like, whatever, subordinates, door boroughs, here you go.
Yeah.
Haunting Ground had this vision from the start. The reason why it's a game of two halves is because Haunting Ground just nosedives into just being considerably worse at this point. Less interesting stalkers, less interesting levels, it just feels like it drags on so much, and we were so fucking out of it. We were so done back in our original 2020 playthrough. And as a result of this, I'm going to recreate the feeling that we had. I am going to do what we did when we played this in 2020.
Yeah.
Which is I'm going to immediately start ordering a Burger King. Ash, do you want anything?
I would love to have a Burger King. We've been here for a while. This is actually turning out to be one of our longest episodes.
It really is.
Yeah. And we played a lot of the game as well. We played like 2 hours of Haunting Ground.
We did.
Yeah.
We really did. Maybe it's just the autumn light is like dying down. It's getting darker, but it feels so much later than it actually is.
Yeah. So while you're doing this is when I'm going to come to my half-hearted defense of Haunting Ground. The game has 4 stalkers, and I think the traditional breaking point that we have is that after Daniella, the game just turns to crud.
Yeah.
I think Ricardo, who is the 3rd stalker, his first level is still good.
Okay.
He's not a good stalker. He's kind of boring, but his level is good. It has a really complex puzzle concerning all these alchemical machines. There's a lot of really good mise-en-scène, lots of intricate sets with really good red harsh lighting that I like quite a lot.
Yeah.
And it's still good classic Haunting Ground content.
Yeah.
And then it becomes considerably worse, and I will totally agree with you there.
Yeah.
We would always say that the game has a terrible second half. I would say it has a terrible last third.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because like when I was doing my playthrough, it took me 7.5 hours, and I was enjoying the game until hour 6.
So Ricardo kind of like starts out well, but I think in the way that a lot of these kind of like halfway points go down, it's kind of a gradual decline. But
Yeah,
it's
so like
sharply
Ricardo's
drops.
level is worse than Daniella's. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And so much of that is because Ricardo is just plainly uninteresting. Ricardo is a clone of the main villain of the game, who's called Lorenzo. The kind of weird thing about this game is that it's about the pursuit of immortality, which is the great goal of all alchemists in all alchemist stories, is they want to find eternal life, and it's hard to find.
Yeah.
But for some reason, and it's actually a really interesting interpretation of what it means to be immortal, because Lorenzo has lived for hundreds of years, but the implication is that he's not lived in his own body forever, is that he keeps cloning himself.
Oh, yeah.
And he considers his clones to be a continuation of himself and to have the same consciousness and to be the same life.
Yeah, Lorenzo is the, what would you call him?
The master of the castle.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
It's kind of confusing. There's lots of weird alchemical concepts in this game that kind of go over my head. There's a dry method and a wet method, who knows? He is opposed to Lorenzo because he's kind of like the brash, younger version of him. He's got his own goals for Fiona that are different than what Lorenzo wants to do with her, basically. The thing about Ricardo, this is the important thing about Ricardo, is that he is really boring. He's a guy in a fully brown outfit with a gun. And that's his entire gimmick. And he's just dull as dishwater. He just chases you and he shoots you. And it's like, I guess that's effective, but it's not scary. Like,
incredible. Yeah.
And like all of his lines are just like, I've got you and haha. And it's like, that's not interesting. And you know what? This is what I was thinking about this game when I replayed it, which makes it make sense to me.
Yeah.
Because Lorenzo and Ricardo, despite being completely dull and pedestrian, that's where the story was going. They had to be the villains because that's what the plot is.
Yeah.
But they could have tried a little harder to make him distinct.
They really could have done, because Ricardo's design is so boring. He's got like a brown monk's hood on.
Yeah. And like they have concept art of him where he's wearing this really regal, like Edwardian style clothing, and he looks way cooler. And it's like, why was that not the design?
I guess it's because like they couldn't have figured out a way to hide his identity, because who Ricardo is a huge part of the.
All right, I need to talk about this now. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit. But the whole thing with Ricardo, right, is that he's wearing this hood and you never see his face.
Yeah.
And then once you meet him later on, it's in this forest, which is terrible, but we'll get into it. He pulls down his hood and he's like, "Look upon my visage, Fiona, my horrible face."
Yeah.
And he looks like a boring guy. He's just like an old
He's just
dad.
a dude.
Because the thing is, the reason why it's shocking and why Fiona reacts so poorly is because he is a clone of her father.
What?
What?
Oh, sorry, I thought they still had the Memphis King, and I can't find it. What the fuck?
This is outrageous. We can't perfectly recreate the experience.
Oh my goodness, this is such a devastating thing. Sorry, anyway, Ugo Belly.
Ugo Belly. But this is the thing, dear listener. We have not seen Ugo Belly yet. We do not know what Ugo Belly looks like. So there's this cutscene where he pulls down his hood and he's my dad. And he's like, what do you think? And it's like, he's just a guy, I guess.
Like, we don't have any context for this.
Yeah,
like,
it's so ineffective. Like, it's so... Like, why would they think that was the right order to do that in?
And it's just, Ricardo is the perfect storm of me just being like, oh, fuck off, Haunting Ground, because his big stalker gimmick, the thing that separates him from everyone else, is that Ricardo has a gun.
Yeah, and he goes pew pew.
Yeah, he has an old style flintlock pistol that he just fires 3 shots of into nowhere, very haphazardly. It doesn't even give him much range. He has to go right up to you to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a fucking flintlock. You're firing 3 bullets out of this thing in quick succession.
Well, that's the infinite power of alchemy, my friend.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, he must have alchemied his way to getting 3 extra.
No, he got a dish rag and he cleaned it.
Oh, Jesus. All right. Same person who told me about the 10mm bullet, please tell me about why this would be bullshit. The fuck. Oh, my fucking God.
So yeah, like, I think the thing that distinguishes him is that he's the most hostile towards Hewie.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Like,
he fucking kicks Hewie.
He will attack Hewie unprovoked.
Yeah.
Like, the other stalkers will mostly ignore Hewie unless Hewie attacks them. He will just, like, try and shoot Hewie. He'll kick him. He's a real jerk.
Yeah.
But it is just another example of the fact that he's just a guy.
Mm.
He's just a mean guy. And, like, there's no real energy to him, or there's no theming that mirrors something about the story that's evocative. It's like, he's just a guy. And, like, he wants, following on from the philosophy that immortality is just making endless clones of yourself.
Yeah.
He just wants Fiona so that she can give birth to him. All of his dialogue to her is that he's like, you will give birth to me.
Yeah, she'll be the incubator for his next clone, which I guess the implication of that is that he's just straight up gonna fuck her.
Yeah, he does, yeah. He's a failed clone, essentially. So, like, the whole thing is that he's got this really craggly, scarred face, and the reason is that his form is so unstable that he's basically, like, just crackling apart.
Yeah.
And he has to use what's called the dry method to exact Azoth from animals and other living things. That's why he's got Hewie. He's trying to steal his Azoth.
And that's what Azoth is, okay.
Azoth is life essence.
Right.
So he's absorbing life essence from dogs and other mammals to try and keep his body going, basically.
Yeah.
He's falling apart until he wants to give birth to this beautiful, complete version of himself.
Is that what John Raimi needed in Geist? Is that what he was taking from plants?
He was taking the Azoth out of plants,
Oh,
yeah.
man.
He's making out with those plants.
Oh, jeez.
So the thing is that Lorenzo made 2 clones of himself, which is Ricardo and Ugo, who is Fiona's father. So he's technically Fiona's grandfather in a weird kind of way, and Ricardo is technically her uncle. And Ugo is the perfect clone of Lorenzo, and very importantly, he has the Azoth.
He has it.
So Azoth is a life essence, but he's chock full of Azoth. He's full to the brim with Azoth.
Yeah, he's got the Azoth.
He's got big Azoth energy in his balls. And I know this for true, Connor.
Because Azoth is stored in the balls.
Azoth is stored in the balls, and when he escapes Belly Castle and has sex with a human woman, he shoots the Azoth into her. And a little Azoth baby grows in her stomach. And he no longer has the Azoth. He has shot his Azoth load, and it's gone. And then Fiona is born, and now she has the Azoth in her womb.
Okay. It's part of her genetic makeup that she has
she's got
the Azoth.
A dollop of Azoth. You know, just completely full of Azoth.
Oh, Christ.
So the implication, I suppose, is that if Fiona is then impregnated, the baby will then take the Azoth from her, and that baby will be Ricardo.
Yeah, it passes on the torch.
The beautiful Azoth legacy.
Do I make my second ill-timed My Hero Academia reference of the night?
Sure, go on.
You know, it's like a one for all.
It gets more powerful each time. Yeah. The Azoth grows in strength each time.
Jesus Christ.
So there's not necessarily too much to say about Ricardo's actual level, which is called, it's like the laboratory. Because this is where a lot of the alchemical machines and tools are being stored. You actually find so it's technically Fiona's character model, but as the wiki points out, with smaller boobs. Fantastic. But I thought that to mean that that's like a clone of Fiona, but technically no. I think the implication is that's what they used to make Daniella.
Ah, okay.
So they're growing a little Daniella in there.
I see. So the reason why it's Fiona's character model is more serendipity.
Yeah, it's just they have a female character model. They'll just
Yeah.
take her clothes off. They already do that a lot anyway. So
yeah,
bish bash bosh.
Yeah, so that kind of makes sense, but that's kind of what they're working on.
Yeah.
You sure you didn't want anything?
So yeah, there's not necessarily too much to say about Ricardo's level. It has some really good visuals. I think there's an overarching puzzle which I quite like, which is you basically have to take a element through the entire alchemical process. So you've got to take it from these like big machines and room to room and figure out what the right order is. So there's like a synthesizer and a decomposer and all things like that.
Isn't this also where the potato people start showing up?
This is where the little potato people are. Yeah, that's exactly right.
They're kind of like a replacement for the luminescence.
Yeah, they're basically little potato men, and they run up to you and they grab you and they scream. Although Hewie will usually knock them off you.
Oh, well, that's good for good.
Which actually makes them more tolerable than luminescence, because Hewie just does them for you. Basically.
Yeah, luminescence you can't touch.
Yeah. Next is the Chaos Forest.
The what?
The Chaos Forest, boy.
By Sigma, the end times must be upon us.
He did the Warhammer thing. So basically what you're doing is that you're at the front entrance of the castle. Like there's an entrance out that goes out into a forest. And so you use the White Godstone to balance some scales, and that opens the front doors. And it's like, oh, cool. I'm escaping the mansion. I'm out of here. I'm back in the outside world. I'm my own destiny now. However, once you begin walking through the Chaos Forest, which I will keep calling it that, Ricardo shows up and he shoots Hewie.
Fuck.
Yeah, so like this is the point in the game where if you don't have a good enough relationship with Hewie, he will not jump in front of you and save you, and he'll just shoot you. He'll just shoot you, and that's when you get one of the bad endings.
Oh my god.
But in our playthrough and in all my playthroughs, we did have a good enough relationship with Hewie. We gave him beef jerky. He's a good lad.
Yeah.
Hewie is in this little clearing with his paw all injured, and he's like, and it's like, oh no, precious Hewie. And Fiona is like, okay, I need to get Ricardo as far away from Hewie as possible because he's going to kill Hewie. I need to get him out of here. It's a forest with lots of different paths and little places you can hide, and like it's a very confusing map. There's no map of the area. You've got to basically memorize it.
Yeah.
And the objective is that you have to get from one point of the forest to another point, which will then trigger a cutscene, which will lead to the next area.
Yeah.
So when we were doing this, we had so much trouble because we kept running into Ricardo and we just couldn't get him to leave us alone. Like he would just chase us through this forest endlessly and we'd get really lost, and it was a huge nightmare.
He shoot his gun in the air as like a taunt.
When I was doing it a few weeks ago, I got to the Hewie part, hid from Ricardo in a bush, and he lost me immediately. And then I somehow just walked perfectly in a perfect line to the ending.
Oh.
Like I just, on pure chance, I just walked straight to the cutscene and did the entire forest in 5 minutes.
Oh, fucking hell. Serendipity.
There you go. Like, or it's skill.
Yeah, you perfectly remembered everything.
So this is when you get to this cutscene, he then takes down the hood. He does the whole "I'm the clone of your father," blah 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 blah. He then knocks Fiona out, and this is one of the points in which you only get a cutscene if you're playing the game for a second repeat, because he has Fiona on his operating table and he kind of prods at her in a way that's very
like ooh,
very intrusive and very disturbing because he's keeping tabs on the Azov.
Yeah.
You then wake up in the water tower. And this is when Haunting Ground loses me. This is when the game sinks into a level of quality that is shocking and is such a disparity from the rest of the game that I feel like I can't believe the people who made the Daniella stuff made this part of the game.
I mean, at this point, I was already trying to coax Marley into the room.
Oh, yeah. You were doing anything that you could to be enjoying yourself.
Yeah, but to be fair, though, the ridiculousness of it is still kind of entertaining to me, because it was the fact that, like, for the second half of the game, Ricardo's just invisible.
Yes, and this is there are two elements that make the water tower unbearable. One is that Ricardo is invisible.
Yeah.
He rubs some magic powder on your eyes, and that makes you unable to perceive him. So he's invisible for the entire section, so you have no idea where he is, or if he's going to hit you, or if you're even getting away from him. And the second thing is that the water tower is basically a linear straight line up this tower. Yeah. There are no hiding points in the entire area.
It's almost like an endurance marathon of just don't get hit by Ricardo enough.
Yeah, and also, like, Ricardo at this point is the easiest stalker to evade. He will lose sight of you very quickly. But it basically just means you just go up a floor of the water tower, trigger Ricardo, run back down, lose him, go back up, progress a little bit further, get chased by Ricardo, lose him, and you just repeat that for about 20 minutes until you get to the top of the water tower.
Fuck me, it's a level design equivalent of the Battle of the Somme.
Basically, yeah, it's trench warfare, but it's about an invisible guy chasing some cute girl around.
Yeah, maybe not the best analogy, never mind.
Yeah, no. But that's the water tower. It's really annoying, although my little defense of this game is that it is quite short. It's a quite simple level. You can get through it very quickly if you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
But that is me just trying to defend it. Like, that's still bad that it's there. So you then get to the top of the water tower and you find this little scale model of the area that you're in.
Yeah.
And you take out because you're in this tower surrounded by water, and there's a castle on the other side of the lake, but you can't reach it because there's water there.
Yeah.
So you get this little model of a bridge, and you replace the water in the model with a model of a bridge, and that makes that happen in the actual world. Like, it makes a bridge rise out of the water, basically.
Yeah.
This is then when you do Ricardo's sick-ass boss fight, where there's this big structure in the middle of this top of the water tower, where there's little holes in it. Yeah. And if you make Hewie go into the holes, he'll appear at one of them at the top.
Yeah.
And you've got to find the one that lines up with this break in the wall surrounding the room. You've then got to bait Lorenzo to stand in front of them and get Hewie to jump on him. That will then push him off the tower to his death.
You mean Ricardo, not Lorenzo.
Ricardo, sorry, Ricardo.
No, it's fair. Their names, their end similarly. It's 3-syllable stuff.
They are clones of each other.
They are clones. Really doesn't do them any favors.
This is also the cutscene where Ricardo yells, "Let me into your womb."
Right, yeah. As he comes at you to battle.
Yeah.
It's just...
It's very silly. And, like, he falls off the tower, and as he falls, he's like, "Fiona!" And then bleh on the floor. And then you also get a cutscene in the second playthrough here where Lorenzo crawls across the bridge and makes out with Ricardo to steal his ass off. He's like, "Ricardo, you are always incomplete, but your death will not be in vain. I will have your ass off." But it's just like, what the fuck? He starts making out with his corpse, and it's like, oh, God.
And that's kind of the end of Ricardo, that whole section of the game, which we then pivot to Lorenzo, who is residing in another second castle.
Yeah, he's got like his second castle, like his casual like summer castle that he hangs out in, you know,
which is like down the road.
Yeah. Like... You have to walk across this massive bridge, like, because also like he also has a big tower.
Yeah,
like he has a castle, an old mansion, a tower, and another castle.
Fucking hell!
Yeah.
Like, how did this go off the record, off the map?
Well, I guess when you've got 500 years to save, you know, you can do a lot of stuff.
Oh, jeez, yeah. I mean, those records of everything going on, you know, they date back to like 1784 and then into the 1800s. One of the logs is from like the Christmas of 1944.
Yeah,
so,
December 29th.
So fucking Mussolini was being hanged around the time this was happening. So
Roosevelt was being elected again.
Yeah,
and Ricardo was like. So this is when you get to the final area of the game, which is not necessarily a particularly large area. So it's called the Hall of Truth. I'm not sure what the right word is, but it's this kind of like very old architecture with lots of low-hanging ceilings. It's got this weird like craggly rock formation. Like it looks more like the inside of a cave than the inside of a building. Like it's kind of strange like that. And you get to the end, and you get to Lorenzo's basically his quarters, and he's sitting there in this wheelchair, and he's like, "Fiona, you finally reached me." Because at this point in the game, you still think that Lorenzo's on your side.
Yeah.
Because he's been helping you out through the entire game, leaving you notes and kind of giving you guidance. And then he's like, "Fiona, you have finally reached me, and I can have your ass off! Ass off!" And he's just screaming about ass off. And then he's sitting in a wheelchair, right? And you think, is he going to chase you in the wheelchair?
Yeah, like, is he going to wheel it along?
No, he just falls out of his wheelchair and crawls along the ground after you.
Yeah, but disturbingly quickly.
Although he has the lowest health pool of any stalker in the game.
I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah. And this area is just weird puzzle-wise because you have to get him to basically set off a bomb. Like there's like there's this wall, right?
Yeah.
And there's a candle near it, and you have to take this bomb to it and then get him to walk over it, and he blows up the wall. And it's like, okay, I mean that's inventive, I suppose, but it's kind of silly. Like,
how the fuck? All right, even I think if I was distracting myself, I feel like I would. What the fuck? How did I forget that?
Now you were deciding what size chips you wanted at the time, so.
Oh yeah, I had to cut down on the calories.
Yeah.
But
you then lead him to a fucking. I can't even say it. It's like you take him to this meat grinder, and it's like this, it's like this mining machine. It's like this conveyor belt that goes into a grinder.
Yeah, it's processing ore, like mining ore.
And you have to get him to go onto the conveyor belt, kick him so he gets stunned, and then turn it on, and he gets like lifted into the conveyor belt, and he's like, "No, Fiona!"
He gets crushed.
But that is not the end of Lorenzo, sadly.
No,
because Connor. In the immortal words of our forefathers, oh no, he's hot.
oh no, I mean very literally later on, but please continue.
So you go into this new area. It kind of looks like the ancient city from Final Fantasy VII. It's this weird grey, like ruined building. And then suddenly Lorenzo comes out and he's like buff and young and attractive, and he's got this mullet.
He's got like spiky hair. Yeah,
he looks like a fucking like Final Fantasy VII villain. Like he looks like a fucking NPC from one of those games.
Oh man!
And he's voiced by Robert Downs, and he's like, he's like, Fiona, check me out, I'm so cool now.
A slightly more imposing boss fight from Robert Downs than his role as the Prophet of Regret in Halo 2.
Yeah, slightly.
Where you just go up to him, punch him in the face twice, and he's dead.
He's then like, Fiona, welcome to my Hall of Wonders. Go through my color maze. And like, cause you have to go through these rooms, and like the entire room is tilted a certain color, and you have to go through them in a certain order that they form white at the end. So it's like you have to go through like red and then green and then black, so it makes the color that you need.
All the while, I love color puzzles.
All the while, you're being chased by Lorenzo, and he can teleport, and he has magic now.
He's just a wizard.
Yeah, he's just a wizard, and he's just chasing you down, and he's so attractive, and you're just like, okay, fair enough.
Oh man, this glamorous hunky guy is coming after me. He wants my ass off.
Yeah, but I gotta make him work for it. So. So you get to the end of this puzzle, right? I'm sorry that I'm losing it a little bit.
No, it's fine. It's stupid.
The game goes some real places. Like, you get to the end, right, and you fight him in this big lava room.
Yeah.
And like it's a big circular room, and in the middle is a pit of lava. And you have to like stand on these buttons to make jets of steam hit Lorenzo. And like you can get Hewie to fight him, and you can like make him walk over these bits of lava that fall out of the pit until eventually you damage him enough that he falls into the lava. Surely he's dead.
Well, yeah, it's fucking lava, right?
He has been disintegrated beyond repair. He must be gone.
Yeah.
No, my friend, because you begin to leave, and he climbs out of the lava pit.
And guess what? Oh no, he's hot.
So fiery hot.
Yeah.
That his touch is instant death. So this is kind of like the last section of the game, is you have to run back through the area to get away from him.
Yeah, and it seems to have self-destructed now that he's dead.
It's like a Resident Evil, like the end of a Resident Evil game, like... The whole of truth will self-destruct in 5 minutes.
Yeah. And you have to, like, crouch to stop yourself
Yeah, so there's like an earthquake, and if you're not crouched while it's going, you'll fall over. And the whole thing is that you're trying to get away from Lorenzo, and if he touches you, you will die instantly.
Yeah.
But while you're going through, a pillar will fall on you. And if you haven't made enough space between yourself and Lorenzo by the time the pillar falls on you, you are doomed. He will get to you before you can lift it off you. So that's kind of like the skill check there, is have you gotten far enough away from Lorenzo to get through that section?
Yeah.
That's the end of the game. That last pillar.
It's just that pillar.
Yeah, you mash the pillar, and then once you do that, there's a cutscene where Fiona walks 10 meters down into the next room, and then he's on fire, so he burns to death.
Then perish.
Yeah, he just falls down and becomes a skeleton.
Yeah.
It's like the end of Anastasia, where Rasputin turns into bones and just fades away.
Never heard of a better comparison than fucking Rasputin.
And then I think this is the thing that I always like, is that Debilitas, Daniella, and Ricardo are all figures to be pitied because they're all missing something. So Debilitas hasn't got his intelligence, Daniella doesn't feel like a complete woman, and Ricardo is like a imperfect clone, basically.
Yeah.
So there's always a slight sense of sympathy. I think the least sympathy that the character gets is Ricardo, because Fred is like, no, you're irredeemable. You have your wits about you. You're a person, and you're still choosing to be villainous, basically.
Yeah.
When Lorenzo dies and you look at his corpse, she just goes, what a fucking bastard.
Yeah.
Like, what a piece of shit.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, I think she's like, finally he's dead. I'm so sick of him.
Yeah, and it's the end of her journey. And I did not know that QuickTime event is the way the game ends.
Yeah, that's the check. Yeah, that's the final boss of Haunting Ground.
Amazing.
And I quite like the ending, because what it is that Fiona goes to the final gate.
Yeah.
And she's trying to put the key in the lock, and she can't quite do it. Her strength is failing her. And then she looks to Hewie, and Hewie, like, he gives her a little, like, you can do it. And her hand steadies, and she can finally open the gate. And if you've kept Debilitas alive, you get an ending where, as she's leaving, she turns and she sees Debilitas, and he just bows to her. And he goes about his business, and she goes, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's no secret to say that out of that Haunting Ground, Clock Tower, Rule of Rose trifecta, I presume that Fiona is your favourite of the three.
She is my favourite. She could defeat Jennifer in a fight.
Well, everyone could defeat Jennifer in a fight.
Not 5 rat boys.
Okay, true. 5 rat boys would get killed by Jennifer.
Yeah.
But that's a topic for another day.
Well, I think Fiona's just like a go-getter.
Yeah.
Like, she's just energetic and she's intrepid. Like, I like that about characters.
Yeah, that's fair enough. You got to admire the fact that she went through the whole thing.
Exactly. And she kind of grows as a person as well. Like, she becomes... I think it's the whole thing in the sections with Lorenzo and Ricardo. She becomes less timid.
Yeah.
Like, she's more like, all right, I'm done with this now. I got to get away from these people. Like, I'm not going to, like, stand there and watch them as they do things to me now.
Yeah. it's still a thing of like I have to give some credit to the the names again.
Yeah.
I have to give some credit to the Lorenzo final fight and everything for just being so stupid.
Oh, it goes hard in a bad way, but it's still fun to watch.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it was entertaining
Yeah.
to kind of like see that and just be like, what the fuck?
And honestly, in terms of metrics, because we always said the game has a bad second half.
Yeah.
Like the Chaos Forest, the Water Tower, and Lorenzo's Hall of Truth is like an hour.
Mm.
Like it's not actually that much of the game.
No.
Like, which doesn't make it better, but it does make it more tolerable, basically.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's part of that game just falling apart as they couldn't put the time into it to make those parts of the game any more than they were.
Like, I enjoyed 80% of Haunting Ground.
Yeah. Whereas I would say I enjoyed 50% of Haunting Grounds.
There's just no winning with some people, I suppose.
Listen, at some point, it's a matter of taste.
Yeah, definitely. This is definitely a game that's very geared towards my interests and stuff like that.
That's fair.
So, is it now prudent to talk about the game's endings?
I think it'd be a good idea. I think you've already mentioned one of them.
Yeah, so there's technically 4 endings, but there's only really 3 endings. One of them, or 2 of them, is just Fiona leaving the castle at the end, having successfully escaped all of her pursuers. The only difference being that in some of them you'll have Debilitas, and in others you won't.
Yeah.
The other ending is when you leave the mansion early on a second playthrough. Fiona just leaves. She's got a key for the gate. She unlocks it. No one stops her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I was so sure. I knew about this ending for the longest time, but I had never gotten it because I didn't play. You don't finish Haunting Ground and go, put me back in, baby. Let's do it one more time. But no, you just get away. And Fiona wins.
Oh.
And then there's a really doofy scene where Lorenzo is rolling in his wheelchair being like, no, Fiona! And then he rolls down some stairs and just falls down them and is there on the ground like, my ass off!
Yeah, he's pathetically lying there going, Fiona, no!
It's very stupid. And then the other one is the bad ending, and it's basically, if you're not nice to Hewie, he won't come and save you at the end of the game, and Ricardo will have his wicked way with you.
Yeah.
And we just watched this scene. Oh my god, it's fucking stupid.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be more... I mean, it is disturbing, but I thought it was going to be more disturbing than it was.
There are some elements that make it silly. Like, Fiona's in this weird time cube. She's in this, like, prison.
She's locked in a glass cube.
Yeah.
Like a goldfish.
And, like, Ricardo is looking at her and he just says, hello, Fiona. I've decided you will give birth to me.
Yeah, it's the way he says, I have decided you will give birth to me.
Like just now, you know?
Like, you know.
I was thinking about it.
Without context, it just seems like the silliest shit.
It then cuts to the beginning room in the game, the room where Fiona gets changed, and it's kind of like the first room you go into.
Yeah.
And Fiona is sitting in this red chair, and Ricardo comes over to her and kind of touches her gingerly, and she's pregnant, like the statue from the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And then Fiona just starts laughing maniacally.
Yeah. Which I feel is a bit like Daniella. She laughs like Daniella does during some of the like scenes when she's pursuing you and such.
Yeah.
And it kind of like zooms out and everything as it kind of holds onto that and then fades to black. Which I imagine for some people that couldn't cotton on that being nice to Hewie would have saved Hewie, they probably would have played it and been like, fuck kind of game is this? You know? Because they've played like 75% of the game at that point.
Although I think it's quite hard to not be friends with Hewie. You just naturally get to have a relationship with him over the course of the game.
Yeah, unless you deliberately kick him.
Yeah, you can kick Hewie. It's sad.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll be kicking and then Hewie will run in front of your foot and get kicked. And he'll go like, hee! And it's like, no, Hewie, I'm sorry. Why would you kick precious Hewie?
I wouldn't deliberately.
He's so precious.
He is precious.
There's one more thing I want to talk about.
Oh, yeah?
Which is the secret room.
Oh, right.
And that's not my words for it. You unlock an option in the menu which is called the secret room.
Yeah.
And it's basically a little bonus room where you can look at concept art, you can look at sick drawings of Lorenzo.
Yeah,
you can look at a model viewer where you can play all their animations, and that's quite fun.
Yeah.
You get more costumes, so the costumes are stupid. There's the cowgirl outfit where like Fiona is wearing this ridiculously revealing cowgirl outfit, and she's got a gun rather than shoot Lorenzo. It's fantastic. There's illegal in some stage, which is this fucking like BDSM leather gear with a whip, and that's just stupid. And then of course the sexiest outfit of all, the frog.
Oh my god, the frog outfit just.
So the other 2 things of note is that you unlock a hard mode, which no thank you, because apparently the thing in the hard mode is that Hewie has a health bar, and if he gets too much damage, he will die, and that's game over.
Just gone.
There are no healing items in the game other than the ones you make through alchemy. and all of the stalkers are much more aggressive and do much more damage.
Okay, because those latter two seem relatively normal for a hard mode thing. I think I like the idea of Hewie having his own health bar, but I imagine that just becomes annoying.
It must be like the game is already pretty frustrating at the worst of times. Like ratcheting up the difficulty just seems like a nightmare. Yeah.
Especially considering that Hewie will just go off on his own, wander around and such. Sometimes attack the almost call them the subordinates, the stalkers. It's a thing of like that just seems like a pain in the ass.
When you're playing on hard mode, instead of Fiona's comments, you get Hewie's.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Instead of getting Fiona's, you'll see little messages from Hewie. And Hewie will be like, Fiona, I love you so much, you're so cool. And like, oh, that mean lady's gotta stop touching Fiona.
That feels like it would be worth it. I'd want to see what Hewie would have to say. That's fucking fun.
Finally, hear his side of the story.
Oh my god. Could you imagine if you were playing like... I can't think of a good fucking comparison point for this. Could you imagine... Right.
No. Because you clearly can't either.
No, I can't.
You're not really taking me on a mental mind journey here,
no,
man.
I was trying to think of ones and all of them were stupid. It was like,
like if you got the Arbiter's comments.
What if the Arbiter was the funny one in Halo 2?
That would be good, yeah, I'd be into that.
It's actually they just swapped the voice actors.
Or you get Dennis's comments from Clock Tower.
Okay, that would be more fitting. Yeah. Dennis is the Hewie of Clock Tower. He's just as useless. Actually, that's not fair on Hewie.
Hewie does a lot of good work.
Hewie does a lot of good work. I don't know why I called him useless indirectly.
And then the other thing that you unlock is Hewie mode.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a stupid, idiot, stinky, smelly minigame where you're playing as Hewie and you're trying to guide Fiona through the levels and trying to stop her from getting killed by the stalkers. And it's infuriating because Fiona is a mad woman. It led to the beautiful line, where the fuck is Fiona? Why is she fucking around? Because she just runs off and she never follows you. Yeah. And she kept telling us to stop.
Why?
She kept going, stop. And it was like, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
What do you want, girl?
She just stand there and do nothing.
And it's like, all right, well, great. That's stupid. It's really frustrating. The only thing that's cool about it is that you get stalkers in areas that are not in the main game. So it's like, what if Debilitas was in the forest?
Ooh.
What do you think of that? But yeah, other than that, that's kind of the long and short of Haunting Ground.
Well, I suppose there is, I think, a fair bit of potential to replay that kind of game, but with the stalkers swapped around and items to be kind of, mixed up, but the game doesn't seem to have that.
No, it's 2005. They weren't doing dynamic difficulty or scalars or anything like that, so
no.
it's quite conventional. You get a hard mode, there are costumes, that's kind of it.
Yeah, it's still quite a lot by today's standards, I suppose. Like model viewers and such are just so
The model
rare.
viewer is nice, and that's a big Capcom thing. They love doing that. Because they had that in RE4 and RE5 as well.
Yeah, they do. So, that's kind of where we make our conclusions on Haunting Ground. Ash, I can tell from the energy that you've had across the entire evening that you are a big fan of Haunting Ground, or at least...
I am fascinated endlessly by Haunting Ground. And I find it a very bittersweet game in many different ways. So it's bittersweet for me because it's the last attempt by one of my favorite developers in a genre that I hold very dear to my heart. I always hold Haunting Ground to this kind of end of an era thing. It's also something that benefits Rule of Rose. Because I'm like, that's the end of my favorite part of games. That's when they stopped making them. So I have to like Haunting Ground and Rule of Rose because that's all I've got at this point.
Yeah.
It's also, to me... It feels like such an effort to kind of try and have like one last desperate attempt to evolve the formula to make it live on to a new generation.
Yeah.
And they failed not because of a lack of talent, but because I think the road was just running out. I think there was nothing they could have done that would have brought attention back to that style of game.
No, that's the thing, right? Because that happens with a few genres. I don't like to be utterly defeatist on the matter because the genres can come back in some capacity, and
they have with survival horror in a certain way.
Yeah, the genres kind of have to evolve. They have to change themselves up. In some ways, one could argue the same thing about real-time strategy.
Yeah.
I'd say Total War is really the main exception. Total War keeps going, and that had to drastically change. Loads of people argue about Warhammer over the historical ones, but survival horror, like every genre, has to adapt.
Yeah.
And now that we have things like the new wave of Resident Evils and the like, it's seeing some light again.
Yeah, I just wish they had been successful. I wish there wasn't a massive gap in games where they just weren't making the kind of games that I like.
Yeah.
That's why, to me, it's sad, because I think they did do a lot of really good stuff, but there just wasn't enough attention or enough interest in the industry for that kind of game anymore.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider this game came out after Resident Evil 4.
Yes.
Like, kind of all the air for this kind of game was just sucked out of the room. And now every game that was like this, every critic would be like, oh, it's bullshit. This game sucks.
I wouldn't be surprised if people said Haunting Ground was dated.
They did, yeah. So
Yeah.
Haunting Ground probably quite obviously was a fairly significant commercial failure. Like, it's not a very popular or well-known game, I suppose.
Yeah, it seems cult classic.
Yeah, like, YouTubers know it because they like playing horror games. That's
Yeah.
kind of like it's been its main legacy, but it didn't do very well. Like, I didn't review very well either. I got lots of 6s and 7s, I
Yeah.
think, from my memory, but
Yeah.
I like it a lot. It means a lot to me.
I think that out of that trifecta that you mentioned, the Haunting Grounds, Clock Tower 3, Rule of Rose trifecta, this is the most competent of the three.
It's like saying that you're more competent than, like, some rocks you found. Like,
okay, fair.
Like, Rule of
But-
Rose and Clock Tower 3
yeah.
are not very well-made
Yeah.
games.
But at the same time, the fact that it does kind of like fall apart during its second half is fascinating and kind of tragic.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have seen the game kind of come into its own a bit more on that front, and it really doesn't. But,
Yeah, if they nailed the landing on the story, I think it could have been something really special.
Yeah.
But for now, it just kind of has to remain a game that I really like.
Yeah. I can't say that I have the exact same amount of enthusiasm as you do, but that's primarily because this isn't necessarily the genre that's always for me.
Yeah.
Which is probably going to be reflected in how I feel about it in the overall rankings.
If we had done this episode before I replayed the game, I would have said middle bottom.
Okay.
And I think my replay has put it to middle high.
Alright, okay.
Playing this game by myself, take from that what you will, Connor. I don't mean that to be
Oh.
insulting. But kind of taking this game on its own terms and kind of maybe playing it in a way where I'm not worried you're getting bored or that I'm like, you're not enjoying this game that we're playing, did a lot for it for me. Where I had a really good time playing it.
I mean, it's a survival horror. It's
Yeah.
an atmosphere game. It's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of better alone in a lot of cases.
Like when I
because
was
of that.
replaying it, like I was presuming that I was only going to play the first few hours so I could remember the basics of it. But I ended up just like coming home from work every day and playing more of Haunting Ground and getting really, really into it. For me, it's gone back up in my estimation because of that replay. I would put it in the high middle.
That's completely fair. I think in terms of the raw qualities of that game, minus any kind of like particular bias, I would say that this game is like, I want to say middle.
Okay.
And the reason I'll say middle is because I think lots of things about it are very competent and are very impressive, but it's just that execution in the second half. The fact that Ricardo and Lorenzo to me are just kind of a joke. Like,
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
don't find them compelling. I think they're awfully executed and they don't interest me at all is a real letdown.
It's
on
a
that front.
it's a huge problem, yeah.
Ricardo's invisibility in his water tower section is fucking stupid. Lorenzo just kind of flies by and
It's a flawed game.
yeah. But in terms of interesting, what would you say?
So, for the reasons that I was giving earlier about its placement in the industry, and also because of the fact that it addresses themes that I feel like a lot of games don't tread upon, because it's hard, you know, like
Yeah.
things about voyeurism and violations of people's privacy and like of their body and things like that. I find it quite interesting, although it's not the most interesting game we've played.
Yeah.
I would say again high middle.
Yeah, I would actually say high.
Okay.
I'd outright just put it in high because I think that just considering the fact that we've gotten so much conversation out about
Yeah,
it,
true.
and you can see how it's done things well, how it's failed, how it didn't succeed as
Yeah.
well financially and everything, and all these smaller details. It is an iteration of Clock Tower, and its themes, specific, like I think its themes really elevate that. Like it really is compelling.
Yeah.
In that front as an interesting game. But in terms of raw fun, where would you put it?
Trying to think back to when we were playing it and if we did have that much fun. Because the thing I remember about this game is that when we were playing it, we were so bored of it that we were ordering Burger King during its most pivotal plot scenes.
Yeah, but I mean, you were enjoying like Daniella and Debilitas.
I listen. A survival horror game, I'm always going to enjoy it.
Mm.
Like I like that structure so much that it could be anything, and I would still be having a good time. But
Mm.
I would say it's kind of middle of the road.
Okay.
I tend to find when it's my games, I actually find them less fun.
Interesting. Okay.
I get kind of worried about like the way you'll be perceiving my tastes. Like
Yeah.
I always worry about people thinking that I'm weird because of the things
Yeah.
I like, and you can see why that would be especially prevalent with Haunting Ground.
Yeah. Well, for the love of God, please do not take this personally because I would like to justify myself if I can. This is low in terms of fun.
Heartbreaking.
It's not the type of game that I find particularly compelling in terms of like
No.
raw fun. But this is the thing. I would argue this about a lot of the survival horrors we play. The appeal and interest of them isn't so much the raw fun of their mechanics as it is something else around them. Like, I'd say the same thing about Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2, as a kind of spoiler, I suppose, I think is top of quality and top of interest. It executes what it does so well. But I wouldn't say that the stancing up and hitting a pair of legs with a stick.
That's not the peak of combat for you?
No, it's not particularly fun to me. So
that's the thing that's so weird. That's the difference, right? Is that is so much fun to me. Like I love that kind of like if you made a horror game in that structure and they had no visuals and no story, I would still like it because I like that setup.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's the thing, is that it's not bottom of the road in terms of fun. It's just, we've played so many other games that step into these other niches and do these other kind of interesting things, or there's something humorous about the way that it falls apart, like Clock Tower, that
I mean, there's a lot of other games where you've more engaged with the mechanics.
Yeah.
Whereas these are mechanics that you'll tolerate, but you're not, like, dying to play more of.
Exactly, yeah. Which is nothing against its quality, because, again, this wipes the floor with Clock Tower as a game.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But have you paid the £90 for a copy of Haunting Ground?
I can't say that I'm particularly yearning to.
And to be fair, I did force Clock Tower upon you.
Well, that much is true, but Clock Tower ended up being one of my favourite games.
There you go. Yeah.
So that's the thing. Maybe not for the right reasons, but it ended up being it.
Well, don't worry, Haunting Ground. I still love you.
At the end of this day, this gloomy day across the haunted ground where no ghosts reside, I have to ask one simple question.
What's that, my friend?
Where the fuck is our food?
Right?
They're pissing around. Where the fuck is it?
Ago.
For God's sake, it was meant to arrive. Jesus Christ. Hewie! I swear, if that fucking dog's run off with our food,
I will shoot him.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was the persona you were taking on.
Do you know what I'm going to do, Connor?
What?
I'm going to declare war on Hewie.
Ah.
This will be a total war.
Alright, so thanks to our continued alliances with the Bretonians, the Lizard Men, and the Empire, we're going to completely steamroll Hewie.
Yeah, he's not gonna. Just imagining the huge army of orcs and elves and stuff, and then it cuts to Hewie, and he's like, oh.
Well,
he just goes up and like grabs one orc by the arm and goes.
For all we know, the auto-resolve might put him in his favour. I don't fucking know.
Alright.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us next time when we talk about Total War Warhammer 3. A game that I have subjected Ash to by comparison, so we will be talking about it on this show. Thank you very much for listening once again.
Try not to lament your lack of a womb too much. I know I'll be trying not to.
And in the meantime, you can check out my main channel, ThunderPsyker, on YouTube, just under that name. I'll have links to it in the top comment as well as in the description.
Absolutely fantastic video recently released about Halo Reach, if you want to go check that out.
Certainly. Something else might be out by the time this is released, but the Halo Reach video would be...
It's a banger.
Thank you very much for listening, and please join us next time for Total War Warhammer 3. But take care, everyone.
Make good choices.
And have a fantastic Halloween.
Ciao.